When grief becomes a dance, the CEO who broke every rule. After midnight. At 10:30 p.m., Ethan Cole wasn't supposed to be in the building. His CEO wasn't supposed to be crying, and neither of them was supposed to admit the truth, that surviving after loss isn't the same as living. But when a single father desperate to escape an empty apartment discovers his untouchable boss dancing alone in the dark, barefoot and broken, one dangerous question shatters every professional boundary. Don't do this alone. Let me dance with you. What happens next will cost them everything, or save them both. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. Let's see how far this story travels tonight. The Maryline Holdings parking garage at 10:30 p.m. was a cathedral of concrete and shadow, the kind of place where sounds died before they could echo. Ethan Cole sat in his 8-year-old sedan with the engine off, hands still gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing through a windshield that needed washing. He'd left the office 3 hours ago, driven home, stood in his apartment doorway, turned around and came back. This was the third time this week. The building's glass facade reflected sodium lights from the street, turning the executive tower into a column of amber and black. Ethan's employee badge hung from his rearview mirror, swaying slightly in the stillness. Level 3 Operations Coordinator. 4 years at Maryline. Decent salary. Good benefits. The kind of stable job that let him keep his daughter Maya in a decent school district, maintain their 2-bedroom apartment, and pretend he had his life together. The badge photo showed a different man, one who smiled with his eyes, not just his mouth. That photo was 2 years old. 2 years and 3 months, to be exact. The last picture taken before Sarah died. Ethan released the steering wheel and flexed his fingers. His wedding ring caught the light, a thin gold band he hadn't been able to remove. Hadn't tried to remove. Some nights he twisted it around and around, a physical prayer to a god he'd stopped believing in, and wondered if keeping it on made him devoted or just stuck. He grabbed his laptop bag from the passenger seat, the excuse he'd given himself for coming back. Forgot some files, need to prep for tomorrow's meeting. All lies his brain told his heart so he'd have somewhere to go that wasn't home. Home. The word had lost its shape. It had become the place where Maya's toys were organized by his sister-in-law because he couldn't touch them without breaking down. Where the second bedroom door stayed closed. Where silence had a weight and texture that pressed against his chest until he thought his ribs might crack. The building's security desk was empty. Marcus clocked out at 10, but the entry system still required a badge scan. Ethan pressed his card against the reader and heard the lock disengage with a soft magnetic click. The lobby stretched before him, all marble and corporate minimalism, the kind of designed emptiness that cost hundreds of thousands to achieve. During the day, it hummed with calculated ambition. At night, it felt like a mausoleum. His footsteps sounded too loud against the polished stone. The elevator bay glowed with soft light, and he pressed the call button more out of habit than intention. The truth was, he had no plan beyond not being in his apartment. Beyond not sitting in Maya's doorway with a glass of whiskey he wouldn't drink, talking to a 7-year-old who was spending the night at her aunt's house again because Daddy needed a little time. God, he was tired of needing time. The elevator climbed to the 3rd floor, that familiar industrial hum filling the space around him. His reflection in the polished metal doors looked gaunt. When had he started looking like this? All angles and shadows, like someone had taken an eraser to the soft parts of his face. Sarah used to trace his jawline with her finger and call him her teddy bear. Now he looked like something carved from driftwood and left to weather. The doors opened onto darkness, broken by emergency exit signs and the pale glow of a few monitors left running. The operations floor was a warren of cubicles and glass-walled conference rooms, all empty. Ethan's desk was in the northeast corner, far enough from the windows that he needed his lamp on even during the day. He'd covered the cubicle walls with Maya's drawings, crayon forests and marker oceans, stick figure families that showed 3 people when there should only be 2. He set his laptop bag on the desk without opening it, sat in his chair, stared at his dark monitor. This was the extent of his plan. Exist in a space that wasn't haunted by what he'd lost. Breathe air that didn't smell like the lavender lotion Sarah had used. Be somewhere his daughter's absence wasn't a constant accusation, some father he'd turned out to be. Maya deserved better than a man who fled his own apartment to sit in an office after hours, pretending to work while actually just hiding from grief so overwhelming it had teeth. The building's HVAC system clicked on, pushing conditioned air through the vents with a low whisper. Ethan closed his eyes and let the white noise wash over him. Maybe he could sleep here. Just put his head down for an hour. At least here he wouldn't dream about hospital rooms and funeral homes and the sound of his daughter asking why mommy wasn't coming home. Then he heard it. Faint, rhythmic, a sound that didn't belong in the geometric silence of an empty office building. Humming. Ethan's eyes opened. He tilted his head, tracking the sound. Not mechanical. Human. A melody he didn't recognize, wordless and haunting, coming from somewhere above him. The fourth floor. The executive level. He should ignore it, should stay at his desk and mind his own business. The executive floor was a different world, one of corner offices and decisions that moved markets. He'd been up there exactly twice in 4 years, once for his initial interview, once for a company-wide meeting where he'd stood in the back and tried to look engaged. But the humming continued, a thread of sound that pulled at something in his chest. Because whoever was making that sound was doing it the way Ethan drove in circles at night, the way desperate people did things that made no sense except as survival mechanisms. He stood, moved toward the stairwell without deciding to move, pushed through the heavy door and climbed the concrete steps, each footfall a small betrayal of common sense. The humming grew louder as he ascended, resolving into something that might have been a lullaby or might have been a dirge. The fourth floor was another country entirely. Where the operations level was utilitarian, this space was designed to impress. Hardwood floors, original art on the walls, furniture that cost more than Ethan made in a month. Recessed lighting created pools of amber warmth along the corridor, and the air smelled faintly of expensive flowers from arrangements that were replaced weekly. The humming came from the far end of the hall. From the corner office with Vivian Cross, CEO etched in steel letters beside the door. Ethan had never met Vivian Cross in person, had seen her exactly 3 times. Twice in passing as she moved through the building like a force of nature in tailored suits. Once on a company video call where she'd announced the acquisition of a competitor with the kind of cold precision that made shareholders happy and employees nervous. The industry press called her the Ice Queen. The financial blogs praised her ruthless efficiency. Employees traded stories about her legendary focus, her impossible standards, her ability to dismantle a weak argument with a single question. She'd taken over Maryline 5 years ago after the previous CEO retired, and under her leadership the company had tripled in value. She was untouchable, unknowable, a figure more myth than human, but the sound coming from her office was devastatingly human. Ethan approached the door, left half open, spilling light into the hallway, and stopped at the threshold. What he saw made no sense with everything he thought he knew about Vivian Cross. She was dancing. Not the confident movement of someone who danced for joy, but the desperate sway of someone trying to hold themselves together through motion. She'd removed her shoes, black heels kicked into a corner, and her stockinged feet moved in small circles on the hardwood floor. Her suit jacket was draped over her chair, and her white blouse had come partially untucked. Her dark hair, usually contained in a perfect knot, had loosened around her shoulders. And she was crying. Not the quiet, controlled tears of someone who cried occasionally, but the wrenching sobs of someone who only let themselves break in absolute privacy. Her arms were wrapped around herself, and she moved in slow, rocking circles, humming that wordless melody between gasping breaths. Ethan should have left, should have backed away silently and pretended he'd never seen this. Watching his CEO fall apart in her office at night was the kind of thing that could get him fired, or worse, could strip away whatever fragile dignity she was trying to preserve in this moment. But he understood what he was watching, recognized it bone deep. This wasn't weakness. This was the same thing he did when he drove aimlessly at night or sat in empty offices after hours. This was a person who functioned perfectly during the day and fell apart when no one was watching. This was someone who'd learned to schedule their grief so it wouldn't interfere with survival. His foot scraped against the door frame. Vivian Cross spun around so fast she nearly lost her balance. Her hand shot out to steady herself against her desk, and for one frozen moment they stared at each other, CEO and employee, two strangers caught in the wreckage of private grief made suddenly public. Ethan watched her face transform in real time. The raw vulnerability vanished behind a mask of control so complete it should have been convincing. Her spine straightened, her shoulders squared, her expression went neutral, then cold. In 3 seconds she rebuilt the armor that made her the Ice Queen, but her eyes were still wet. Her mascara had run in thin black trails, and her breathing came too fast, too shallow. The mask was perfect except for the fact that it was obviously a mask. "Mr. Cole." Her voice was steady, professional, absolutely empty. "I wasn't aware anyone else was in the building." She knew his name. That surprised him more than it should have. He was one of 47 people on the operations floor, and she was the CEO of a company with over 800 employees. But she knew his name. I'm sorry." Ethan's voice came out rough. "I came back for some files. I heard—" He gestured helplessly, unable to finish the sentence. "You heard nothing." Not a request. A statement of fact she was attempting to will into existence. "And you saw nothing. Is that understood?" This was the moment to agree, to apologize again and retreat, to let her maintain the fiction that this encounter had never happened. But something in Ethan's chest was cracking open, and words were spilling out before he could stop them. "I can't do that." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "I beg your pardon?" "I can't pretend I didn't see that." Ethan took a breath that hurt, because I know exactly what that was. Danger flashed across her face. "Mr. Cole, I strongly suggest—" "My wife died 2 years ago." The words came out flat, factual, a wound stated plainly. "Car accident. Some kid texting and driving ran a red light. She was coming home from the grocery store." Vivian Cross went very still. "I have a daughter," Ethan continued. "Maya, she's 7. And for the first year after Sarah died, I held myself together during the day, got Maya to school, went to work, made dinner, did homework, tucked her in. I smiled. I functioned. I was the strong daddy who told her everything would be okay." His voice caught. He pushed through it. "Then at night, after she was asleep, I'd go into the bathroom and turn on the shower so she wouldn't hear me. And I'd sit on the floor and fall apart exactly the way you were just doing, because during the day I had to be a father, but at night I could be the broken thing I actually was." Vivian's mask was cracking. He could see it happening, could see something human and terrified trying to break through. "So when you tell me I saw nothing," Ethan said quietly, "what you're really asking is for me to let you keep doing this alone. And I can't do that, because I know what that kind of alone does to a person." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The office felt too small and too large at the same time, the space between them charged with something dangerous and necessary. When Vivian spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "You should go, Mr. Cole." "I know I should. This is deeply inappropriate." "I know. I'm your boss. There are boundaries, hierarchies, professional—" "Ms. Cross," Ethan met her eyes. "When's the last time you let someone see you?" The question hit like a physical blow. Vivian flinched, and the mask finally shattered completely. What remained was a woman in her early 40s, brilliant and ruthless and utterly lost, standing barefoot in her office at nearly 11 at night because she had nowhere else to be alone with her grief. 5 years, she whispered. "It's been 5 years since anyone—" She stopped, shook her head, tried to rebuild the armor, but it wouldn't hold anymore. Ethan took a step into the office. Just one step. What happened 5 years ago? Vivian wrapped her arms around herself again, but this time it looked less like dancing and more like physically holding herself together. "This is not— we shouldn't be having this conversation." "Maybe not, but we are." She laughed, a broken sound without humor. "You're supposed to apologize and leave, Mr. Cole. That's how this is supposed to go. I'm your CEO. I could fire you right now for witnessing this." "Are you going to?" "I should." "But are you?" Vivian stared at him, and something in her face was shifting, rearranging, like tectonic plates moving beneath skin. "No, I'm not going to fire you." "Then tell me what happened 5 years ago." The silence stretched so long Ethan thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was distant, like she was reading from someone else's history. I had a husband, Marcus. We'd been married for 12 years, and we had a daughter, Sophie. She was 6 years old, past tense, both of them, the grammar of loss. There was a gas leak in our house, old pipes. We were supposed to have them replaced, but kept putting it off. Because we were busy, there was always something more urgent. We were asleep. Marcus and Sophie never woke up. Ethan's chest constricted. Jesus Christ. I was traveling for work. Business trip to Singapore. I got the call at 4 in the morning, their time, 8 p.m. here. By the time I flew back, they were already... She stopped, swallowed. The funeral was 5 days later. The whole company came. Everyone said the right things. How sorry they were. How if I needed anything. How they couldn't imagine. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them against her sides. I took 2 weeks off. Then I came back to work. Because work was the only thing that made sense. Numbers, strategies, acquisitions, things I could control. Things that wouldn't die if I made a mistake. And I've been here ever since, building, growing, winning, being exactly who everyone expects me to be. And at night? Ethan asked gently. At night I come here. Vivian gestured at the office around them. This is the only place that's mine, not the house. I sold that 6 months after. Couldn't stand walking past Sophie's room. Not my apartment. That's just where I sleep between board meetings. This office is where I can close the door and stop pretending I'm okay. And you dance. Sophie loved to dance. A ghost of a smile crossed Vivian's face. She danced to anything. Commercials. The sound of the dishwasher. Her own humming. She'd grab my hands and make me dance with her, and I'd tell her I was too busy. I had calls to make, reports to review. And she'd look at me with those enormous eyes and say, Mommy, the world won't end if you dance for 5 minutes. Tears were streaming down Vivian's face now, unchecked. So now I dance. Every night she would have turned 12, 15, whatever age she should be. I come here and I put on the playlist she loved, and I dance because I never danced enough with her when I could have, when it would have mattered. Ethan felt his own eyes burning. What was she humming? Just now? Her favorite song, the one she'd sing at bedtime. I don't even know what it was called. She'd just hum it to herself when she was falling asleep. Vivian's voice broke completely. And now it's the only thing I have left of her voice. A melody I'm terrified I'll forget. The office felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. Ethan understood with sudden clarity that he was standing at a crossroads. He could leave now, apologize for intruding, promise silence, retreat to professional safety. Let Vivian Cross continue being the ice queen who never cracked, and let himself continue being the operations coordinator who pretended he was fine. Or he could do the most dangerous thing he'd done since Sarah died. He could be honest. I failed my daughter, Ethan said. The words tasted like acid. After Sarah died, everyone kept telling me I was so strong, so brave, doing such a good job holding everything together for Maya. And I believed them because I needed to believe I was doing something right. He moved further into the office, stopping a few feet from where Vivian stood. But the truth is, I wasn't strong. I was numb. I went through the motions of being a father without actually being present, made her lunch without tasting the food, helped with homework without hearing her questions, tucked her in without seeing her face. I was so busy surviving my own grief that I forgot she was grieving too. Mr. Cole, Ethan, please. If we're doing this, if we're being honest, call me Ethan. Vivian nodded slowly. Ethan, then. And you can call me Vivian, though God knows that feels strange to say out loud. Vivian. He tested the name. The thing is, I convinced myself I was protecting Maya by hiding how much I was falling apart, but all I did was teach her that grief was something to be ashamed of, something to hide in bathrooms and empty offices. You were doing your best, Vivian said quietly. My best wasn't good enough. 6 months ago, Maya's teacher called me in for a conference, told me Maya had stopped talking in class, stopped playing with other kids, just sat at her desk drawing pictures of our family, her, me, and Sarah, over and over again. The same picture, different variations, but always the three of us together. Ethan's throat was closing. He forced the words out. The school counselor said Maya was stuck, that she couldn't process her mother's death because I hadn't shown her how, that children learn how to grieve by watching their parents grieve, and I'd been so busy pretending I was okay that I'd left her alone in her grief. "What did you do?" Vivian asked. I finally let her see me cry, sat down with her and told her the truth, that I missed Mommy so much it felt like my chest was breaking, that some days I didn't know how to keep going, that I was sad and scared and angry and lost. Ethan smiled bitterly. "And you know what she said?" Vivian shook her head. She said, "I'm sad too, Daddy. Can we be sad together?" Tears rolled down Ethan's face. I'd been so focused on being strong for her that I never realized she needed permission to be weak, to be honest about how much everything hurt. Did it help? Vivian's voice was raw. "Letting her see you?" She started talking again, started sleeping through the night, started laughing at stupid things. Not because the grief went away. It's still there, for both of us. But because she wasn't carrying it alone anymore. Ethan took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. "But here's the thing, Vivian. I helped Maya stop hiding her grief, but I never stopped hiding mine. I just got better at scheduling it. At night, when she's at her aunt's house or asleep in her room, I still get in my car and drive nowhere. I still come to the office after hours and pretend I'm working. I'm still that man sitting in a bathroom with the shower running, except now I do it where my daughter can't see." He met Vivian's eyes. "So when you tell me to pretend I didn't see you tonight, what you're really asking is for me to let both of us keep doing this. Keep falling apart alone, keep pretending we're okay during the day and breaking in private at night. And I can't do that anymore, because I've seen what that does to a person, what it did to my daughter, what it's doing to me." "What are you suggesting?" Vivian asked carefully. "I don't know. I have no idea what I'm suggesting. But I know that when I saw you dancing and crying in your office, I recognized something I've been doing for 2 years. And I know that recognition means something, that maybe we don't have to do this alone." The office was silent, except for the barely audible hum of the building's systems. Vivian stared at him, and Ethan could see the war happening behind her eyes. The part of her that was CEO and commander versus the part that was a mother who lost her daughter and danced in empty offices to keep from drowning. "This is insane," Vivian whispered. "You work for me. There are rules, professional boundaries. I'm the CEO of this company, and you're an operations coordinator on the 3rd floor who you shouldn't even know by name. But I do know your name." Vivian's voice was almost defiant. "I know all my employees' names. I know you have a daughter. I know you lost your wife. I know you've been Employee of the Quarter twice in the last year because you do excellent work even though you're clearly falling apart inside. I know because I read every performance review personally, and yours always mention how you're professional and competent and never let personal issues affect your work." She laughed, a sound edged with hysteria. And I remember thinking, that's what people say about me. Professional. Never lets personal issues interfere. And I wondered if you were like me, if you'd learned to compartmentalize so completely that no one could see the damage, if you danced alone somewhere where nobody could watch you break. "Do you want to know the truth?" Ethan asked. "I don't know. Do I? I came back tonight because I couldn't stand being in my apartment, because Maya's at her aunt's house again, and my living room feels like a museum of everything I've lost, because I've been telling myself I'm doing better, but really, I'm just getting better at hiding." He took one more step closer. "And when I heard you humming, when I saw you dancing and crying in this office, I didn't see my boss. I saw someone who understands exactly what I'm going through. Someone who's survived the same kind of loss and learned the same terrible skills. How to function while falling apart. How to be strong in public and broken in private. How to keep going when everything inside you wants to stop." Vivian's breathing had gone shallow. "Ethan, what do you want from me?" "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." He stopped 3 feet away from her, close enough to see the mascara tracks on her face, the exhaustion in her eyes, the white-knuckle grip she had on her own composure. "But I know that right now, in this moment, you're doing what I've been doing, falling apart alone. And I'm asking you not to do that, just for tonight, just for right now." "How?" The word was barely a breath. Ethan held out his hand. "Dance with me." Vivian stared at his outstretched hand like it was a grenade. That's You can't. This is the most inappropriate thing anyone has ever suggested to me in a professional setting. I know. I'm your boss. I know. Oh, this could ruin both our careers. I know. Then why are you asking? Because, Ethan said simply, you told me Sophie said the world wouldn't end if you danced for 5 minutes. And you were right. It won't. But maybe it would be a little less lonely if you didn't have to dance alone. Vivian's hand trembled as she raised it, hovering inches from his. I haven't, since Marcus died, I haven't let anyone. I know, me neither. After Sarah, there's been no one. I can barely hug my sister-in-law without feeling like I'm betraying something. Like if I let anyone in, even a little, I'm admitting Sarah's really gone. She is really gone, Vivian whispered. I know, and so is Marcus and Sophie. And we can keep pretending that makes us stronger, or we can admit that we're drowning, and maybe we don't have to drown alone. Vivian's hand dropped into his. The contact was electric and terrifying. Ethan hadn't touched another woman since Sarah died, and Vivian clearly hadn't been touched by anyone in years. Their hands fit together awkwardly, uncertain, two people who'd forgotten how to be human outside of their armor. Ethan's other hand moved to Vivian's waist, the touch formal and careful. She placed her hand on his shoulder, and they stood there in the amber light of her office, two broken people about to do something that made no sense except as an act of survival. I don't remember how to do this, Vivian admitted. Neither do I. Sophie's song, the one I was humming, should I? Yes, please. Vivian began to hum, soft and wavering, that wordless melody that was all she had left of her daughter's voice. And they moved. It wasn't dancing, not really. Just slow circles, shuffling steps, two people holding each other up because standing alone had become impossible. Ethan felt Vivian shaking, felt her breath catch and release, felt the moment her control finally shattered completely, and she collapsed against him, sobbing into his shoulder. He held her. Just held her. Let her cry the way he'd cried in empty parking lots and dark offices, the way Maya cried when she finally let herself remember her mother. Grief without performance, without apology, without the crushing need to be strong for someone else. I'm so tired, Vivian gasped between sobs. I'm so tired of being strong, of making decisions, of pretending I'm okay. I just want 5 minutes where I don't have to be the ice queen or the CEO or the woman who survived. I just want to be sad. Then be sad, Ethan said into her hair. Right here, right now. Be as sad as you need to be. And she was. They both were. Moving in slow, aimless circles, two people who'd learned to function while falling apart, finally letting someone see the damage. Ethan felt his own tears soaking into Vivian's shoulder, felt her arms tighten around him like he was the only thing keeping her from drowning. Minutes passed, maybe 5, maybe 20. Time had lost meaning in the amber-lit space of Vivian's office. Eventually, the sobs quieted into shaking breaths, and the shaking breaths settled into something calmer. They kept moving, kept holding each other because stopping felt like admitting something dangerous. This is insane, Vivian finally whispered. Completely. We can't do this again. We shouldn't. This was a mistake. Probably. But neither of them let go. Eventually, Ethan had no idea how much time had passed. They stopped moving. Stood there in the center of the office, still holding each other, foreheads nearly touching. Vivian's eyes were red and swollen, her makeup destroyed, her carefully maintained armor completely gone. She looked exhausted and young and utterly human. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For not leaving, for seeing me, for... She gestured helplessly at the space between them. This, whatever this was. Ethan stepped back, and the loss of contact felt like tearing off a bandage. What happens now? Vivian laughed weakly. I have absolutely no idea. I should probably pretend this never happened. Fire you for gross misconduct. Report you to HR for inappropriate conduct with a superior. Are you going to? No, God no. But I should want to. I should be horrified that an employee saw me like this. That I let you... She stopped. That I needed this. I needed it too, Ethan admitted. They stood there, two people who'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross, staring at each other in the wreckage of professional boundaries and personal defenses. "We work together," Vivian said finally. "That makes this complicated." "It does. And we're both still grieving, still broken. We weren't thinking clearly. We weren't. So we should probably just pretend this didn't happen. Go back to our respective positions. Maintain appropriate professional distance." "Probably." Vivian's smile was sad and small. "Why does that feel like the worst possible idea?" "Because," Ethan said carefully, "for the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel alone. And I think maybe you didn't either." Vivian closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something in her face had shifted, not hardened, but clarified. "I'm not ready for this. Whatever this is. I don't even know what this is." "Neither do I. But I can't pretend it didn't matter. That seeing you, being seen by you, didn't change something." "So what do we do?" Ethan asked. "I don't know. But I know I need to think about it somewhere other than my office at midnight with my emotions spilled all over the floor." She managed a real smile, fragile but genuine. "Go home, Ethan. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll both be professional and appropriate and pretend this conversation happened in some alternate universe. And if I can't pretend that, then we'll figure something out. But not tonight. Tonight we both need to process whatever the hell just happened here." Ethan nodded slowly. He moved toward the door, then stopped. "Vivian?" "Yes?" "Thank you for letting me see you, for being honest, for—" He gestured between them. "This, whatever this was." "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Vivian." He left the office, closing the door carefully behind him. The hallway felt different somehow, the same expensive art and hardwood floors, but the space had shifted. Everything had shifted. Ethan took the stairs down to the 3rd floor, collected his laptop bag from his desk, and rode the elevator to the parking garage. His car was still the only one there, a lonely island in the concrete expanse. He sat behind the wheel but didn't start the engine immediately. What the hell had he just done? He'd crossed every professional boundary that existed. He'd witnessed his CEO having a breakdown, and instead of discreetly leaving, he'd invited himself into her grief. He'd touched her, danced with her, held her while she cried. Any one of those things could get him fired. Together, they were career suicide. But God, it had felt necessary, essential, like breaking surface after drowning for 2 years. Ethan started the car and drove home, but for the first time in months, the silent apartment didn't feel like a tomb. He checked his phone. No messages from his sister-in-law, which meant Maya was fine, probably asleep by now. He should call her in the morning, maybe actually be present for the conversation instead of just going through the motions. He stood in his living room, looking at the photographs on the walls. Sarah smiling on their wedding day. Maya as a baby. The 3 of them at the beach, happy and whole, a family that didn't know what was coming. "I don't know what I'm doing," Ethan said to the silent room. To Sarah's photograph. To the memory of everything he'd lost. "I don't know if what happened tonight was grief or connection or just 2 broken people recognizing each other. But I felt something. For the first time since you died, I felt something other than numb." The apartment didn't answer. The photographs just stared back, frozen moments from a life that didn't exist anymore. Ethan went to bed but didn't sleep. Lay in the dark, replaying the evening, Vivian's face when she saw him in the doorway, the way her armor cracked and fell away, the weight of her grief matching his own. The feeling of holding someone who understood exactly what he was going through without him having to explain. Tomorrow, everything would be different. He'd go to work and Vivian would be the ice queen again, and he'd be operations coordinator Ethan Cole, and neither of them would acknowledge what happened in her office at midnight, except he knew it wouldn't be that simple. You couldn't unsee someone's grief once you'd witnessed it, couldn't unknow the weight of their pain once you'd held them through it. Something had changed, and Ethan had no idea what it meant or where it would lead. But for the first time since Sarah died, he wanted to find out. Morning came too soon and not soon enough. Ethan woke at 6:15 to his alarm, the same generic chime he'd been ignoring for 2 years. And for the first time in recent memory, his first conscious thought wasn't about Sarah. It was about Vivian Cross standing barefoot in her office, mascara streaking her face, humming a dead daughter's lullaby. He sat up in bed, disoriented by the shift in his internal landscape. The apartment was quiet except for the ambient noise of the building, water running through pipes somewhere above, a door closing down the hall, the city waking up beyond his windows. Maya would still be at her sister-in-law's house. He should call her before school, hear her voice, actually listen instead of just waiting for the conversation to end. But first he had to figure out how to face Vivian at work. The shower ran hot enough to hurt. Ethan stood under the spray and tried to organize his thoughts into something resembling logic. What had happened last night defied every professional boundary he'd ever been taught. You didn't dance with your CEO at midnight. You didn't hold her while she cried. You didn't share your deepest grief with someone who had the power to end your career with a single phone call. Except that's exactly what he'd done. And somehow it had felt like the most honest thing he'd done in 2 years. He dressed carefully, pressed slacks, button-down shirt, the tie Sarah had bought him for his last birthday that he could never quite bring himself to wear. Today felt like the right day for it, like armor he needed to put on before walking back into Merrillline Holdings and pretending the world hadn't shifted on its axis. The call to Maya lasted 7 minutes. She told him about the movie she'd watched with Aunt Jennifer, about a girl at school who'd invited her to a birthday party, about a drawing she'd made of a dragon that she wanted to show him. Ethan listened, really listened, and felt something unlock in his chest at the sound of her excitement. "I love you, sweetheart," he said when she had to go get ready for school. "Love you too, Daddy." A pause. "Are you okay?" The question caught him off guard. "Why do you ask?" "You sound different. Not bad different, just different." "I think I might be okay," Ethan said, and was surprised to find he meant it. Or getting there anyway. "Good. I like it when you sound like you." After she hung up, Ethan sat with his phone in his hand and wondered what version of himself Maya had been living with for the past 2 years. What mask had he been wearing that his 7-year-old daughter could hear the difference when it slipped? The drive to Merrillline took 23 minutes in morning traffic. Ethan parked in his usual spot on the 3rd level of the garage and sat for a moment, gathering courage he didn't know he'd need. The building looked the same as it always did, glass and steel and corporate ambition reaching toward a cloudless sky. But everything felt different now, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. The lobby was crowded with employees arriving for the day. Ethan badged in and joined the flow toward the elevators, surrounded by conversations about meetings and deadlines and weekend plans. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that their CEO had fallen apart in her office last night, while an operations coordinator held her, and they both cried for everything they'd lost. The 3rd-floor operations area was already buzzing when Ethan arrived. His cubicle neighbor, Derek, was on a call about supply chain logistics. Across the aisle, Janet was typing furiously while eating what looked like yesterday's pizza. Everything was exactly as it should be, which made the fact that nothing was the same even more disorienting. Ethan set his laptop bag on his desk and booted up his computer, checked his email, responded to a few routine messages, pulled up the spreadsheet he was supposed to have been working on when he came back to the building last night. Every action felt performed, like he was watching himself go through the motions from somewhere outside his body. At 9:30, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Not here. Coffee shop on 5th and Morrison. Noon. V." Ethan stared at the message. She had his personal cell number. Of course she did. It would be in his employee file, accessible to HR and senior leadership. But seeing V at the end of the text felt intimate in a way that made his pulse quicken. He texted back, "I'll be there." 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Thank you." The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. Ethan tried to focus on work, but found himself reading the same email 3 times without absorbing the content. Derek asked him twice if he was feeling okay, and Janet made a joke about him looking like he'd seen a ghost. He forced smiles and deflected questions and counted down the minutes until noon. At 11:50, he told Derek he was taking an early lunch. The coffee shop on 5th and Morrison was a 15-minute walk from the office, one of those aggressively hip places with exposed brick and reclaimed wood furniture and a chalkboard menu featuring drinks with names like The Existential Crisis and Morning Brew. Under other circumstances, Ethan might have found it pretentious. Today it felt appropriately surreal. Vivian was already there, tucked into a corner booth far from the windows. She'd traded her usual power suit for dark jeans and a cream sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Without the armor of her CEO wardrobe, she looked younger, more approachable, and somehow more dangerous. Ethan slid into the booth across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The coffee shop hummed around them, espresso machines hissing, conversations overlapping, indie music playing just loud enough to provide cover. "Thank you for coming," Vivian said finally. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I wasn't sure. Last night was—" She gestured vaguely. "A lot." It was. A server appeared, young, pierced, radiating the kind of casual confidence only available to people who'd never had their lives fall apart. Vivian ordered black coffee. Ethan asked for the same. When the server left, silence settled between them again. "I didn't sleep," Vivian admitted. "Spent the whole night trying to figure out what to say to you, how to explain or excuse or rationalize what happened." "Did you figure it out?" "No, I kept writing speeches in my head and they all sounded wrong, too formal. Too distant, like I was trying to take a deposition about my own breakdown." She met his eyes. "So I'm just going to be honest, last night terrified me." "Because I saw you?" "Because you saw me and I let you. Because for 5 years I've been so careful to never let anyone close enough to see the damage. And then you walked into my office and within 10 minutes I was falling apart in your arms, like we'd known each other for years instead of never having spoken before." The server returned with their coffee. Ethan wrapped his hands around the cup, grateful for something to do with them. "It terrified me too." "Then why did you do it?" Vivian asked. "Why didn't you just leave when you had the chance?" "Because I recognized what I was seeing, and because—" He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound insane. "Because for 2 years I've been drowning and pretending I could breathe. And when I saw you doing the same thing, I realized maybe we didn't have to drown alone." Vivian looked down at her coffee. "I've built my entire life around not needing anyone. After Marcus and Sophie died, I convinced myself that needing people was weakness, that if I just stayed busy enough, worked hard enough, achieved enough, the grief would eventually fade to background noise." "Did it work?" "What do you think?" Her smile was bitter. "I'm the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, and I spend my nights dancing alone in my office, crying over a daughter who's been dead for 5 years. I'd say my coping strategy has some fundamental flaws." Ethan took a sip of coffee. It was good, better than the office break room swill he was used to. "After Sarah died, everyone kept telling me time would heal, that eventually it would hurt less, that I'd learn to move on." "And did you?" "No, I just got better at hiding how much it still hurt. Better at compartmentalizing, better at being the functional single dad who had his life together." He met her eyes. "Until last night when I stopped pretending for 5 minutes and everything I'd been holding back came flooding out." Vivian's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "What are we doing, Ethan? Really?" "I don't know, but I know that when I walked away from your office last night, I felt less alone than I have in 2 years. And I think maybe you felt the same." "I did. That's the problem." She leaned forward, voice dropping. "You work for me. That creates a power dynamic we can't ignore. If anyone found out what happened last night, that you saw me breaking down, that we danced together, that I cried on your shoulder, it could be construed as inappropriate, possibly even harassment." "Is that what you think it was?" "No, God, no. But it doesn't matter what I think. It matters how it looks. And it looks like a CEO who got emotionally vulnerable with an employee in a private setting late at night. That's a liability for both of us." Ethan set down his coffee. "So what are you saying? That we pretend last night didn't happen? That we go back to being strangers who pass each other in the hallway?" "I'm saying I don't know what I'm saying." Frustration crept into Vivian's voice. "I've spent 5 years being absolutely certain about everything, every decision, every strategy, every move. And now I'm sitting in a coffee shop with an employee I danced with at midnight, and I have no idea what the right thing to do is." "Maybe there isn't a right thing," Ethan suggested. "Maybe there's just what we need." "And what do we need?" The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. Ethan thought about his silent apartment, about Maya's observation that he sounded different. About the weight of grief carried alone for so long, it had started to feel like the only way to exist. "I need to not feel invisible," he said quietly. "I need someone who understands what it's like to function while falling apart. I need—" He stopped, then pushed forward. "I need someone who won't judge me for still being broken 2 years later, for still missing my wife, for still not knowing how to be the father my daughter deserves." Vivian's eyes were bright. "I need those things too. I need someone who won't expect me to be the ice queen every second of every day, who won't be shocked when I admit I'm tired of being strong, who understands that surviving doesn't mean you're okay." "So maybe that's what this is," Ethan said. "Two people who need the same things, trying to figure out if we can help each other." "It's still complicated." "Everything worth doing is complicated." Vivian laughed, a sound that was half relief, half disbelief. "You're not what I expected, Ethan Cole. What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone more deferent? More afraid of me? You saw your boss having a complete breakdown, and instead of running away or trying to leverage it, you offered to dance with me. That's either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Can it be both?" "Probably." She took a breath. "Okay, here's what I'm thinking. We can't do anything at the office. No private meetings, no lingering conversations, nothing that could be misconstrued. As far as Maroline Holdings is concerned, you're an operations coordinator and I'm the CEO, and that's all we are." "And outside the office?" Vivian hesitated. "Outside the office, maybe we could be two people who understand each other's grief, who can talk honestly about what we're going through without pretending to be okay. No pressure, no expectations, just connection." "Friends?" Ethan tested the word. "Is that what we'd be? Friends?" Vivian looked uncertain. "I haven't had a friend in 5 years. I'm not sure I remember how." "Neither do I, but maybe we could figure it out together." Vivian's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and grimaced. "I have a board call in 20 minutes. I need to get back." "Wait." Ethan pulled out his phone. "Can I have your personal number? Not the one you texted me from. That's probably your work phone, your actual personal number." "Why?" "Because if we're doing this, whatever this is, I don't want to only exist during designated coffee meetings. I want to be able to text you at midnight when I can't sleep. I want you to be able to call me when you're alone in your office and the grief gets too heavy." Vivian stared at him for a long moment. Then she recited a number. Ethan typed it into his phone and sent her a message. "It's me." Her personal phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out, not the sleek smartphone she used for work, but an older model with a cracked screen protector, and looked at his message. Something in her expression softened. "I haven't given anyone this number in 3 years," she said quietly. "The only people who have it are my parents and my accountant." "I'm honored." "Don't be. I'm terrified of what it means that I'm giving it to you." She stood, slinging her purse over her shoulder. "I have to go." "But Ethan?" "Yes?" "Thank you. For last night, for today, for not running away when you saw how broken I am." "You're not broken," Ethan said. "You're surviving. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because most days I can't tell." She left before he could respond, disappearing into the lunch crowd on 5th Street. Ethan sat alone in the booth for another 10 minutes, drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm and trying to process what had just happened. He'd come to this meeting expecting professional distance, maybe a polite request to never speak of last night again. Instead, he'd gotten permission to be honest, an exchange of personal phone numbers, and the fragile beginning of something he couldn't quite name. The walk back to Maroline felt different. The city's streets were the same. Crowded sidewalks, honking taxis, the smell of food carts and exhaust. But Ethan moved through them with a lightness he hadn't felt in years, like someone had removed a weight from his chest he'd stopped noticing he was carrying. Back at his desk, Ethan threw himself into work with a focus that surprised him. The spreadsheet that had seemed impossible this morning suddenly made sense. The logistics problem he'd been avoiding for a week resolved itself with a solution so obvious he wondered why he hadn't seen it before. Derek commented that whatever Ethan had eaten for lunch must have agreed with him. At 3:30, his personal phone buzzed. Is it strange that I keep checking to make sure your number is still in my phone? Like I need proof last night and this afternoon actually happened? V. Ethan smiled and typed back. Not strange at all. I've been doing the same thing. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I have dinner plans with my parents tonight. They're in town for my father's birthday. I'm dreading it. Why? Because they're going to ask how I'm doing, and I'm going to lie and tell them I'm fine, and they're going to pretend to believe me. We've been performing this dance for 5 years. I'm tired of it. Ethan thought for a moment, then typed, "What if you didn't lie?" The response came quickly. What? What if you told them the truth, that you're not fine, that you're still grieving, that you miss Marcus and Sophie every single day? A long pause, then, I can't do that. They've worked so hard to move on, to accept what happened. If I tell them I'm still struggling, it will break their hearts. Or it might give them permission to admit they're struggling too. Another pause, longer this time. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying. But I learned something when I finally let Maya see me grieve. Pretending to be okay doesn't protect the people we love. It just teaches them to pretend too. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, I'll think about it. Thank you. For what? For saying the things I need to hear even when they scare me. Ethan put his phone away and returned to work, but his mind kept drifting back to the conversation. He wondered if Vivian would actually be honest with her parents tonight, or if the weight of 5 years of pretending would be too heavy to lift in one dinner. He wondered what it would cost her to admit she wasn't okay, and what it might give her in return. At 5:45, he packed up his laptop and headed home. Maya would be back from her aunt's house by 6, and for the first time in recent memory, Ethan was actually looking forward to seeing her. Not just going through the motions of parenthood, but genuinely excited to hear about her day, to make dinner together, to be present in a way he hadn't managed to be for 2 years. Maya burst through the apartment door at 6:03 with the kind of energy only 7-year-olds possessed. She launched into a detailed account of her day that involved a substitute teacher, a frog in the playground, and some complicated drama about who got to be line leader. Ethan listened and asked questions and felt something warm and almost forgotten stirring in his chest. "What do you want for dinner?" he asked when she finally paused for breath. "Can we make pancakes?" "For dinner?" "You said we could have breakfast for dinner sometimes." "I did say that." Ethan pulled out the mixing bowl. "Chocolate chips or blueberries?" "Both." They made pancakes together, Maya standing on a stool to help mix the batter, giggling when she got flour on her nose. They ate at the kitchen table instead of in front of the TV, and Maya told him about the birthday party invitation and asked if she could go. "Of course you can go," Ethan said. "Really? You're not too sad?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" Maya fidgeted with her fork. "Sometimes when I want to do fun things, you get this look on your face, like you're happy but also sad at the same time. Aunt Jennifer says it's because you miss Mommy, and sometimes fun things remind you of when she was here." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "Your Aunt Jennifer is a smart lady." "So you do get sad?" "Sometimes, yeah. But that doesn't mean I don't want you to have fun. You going to a birthday party and being happy doesn't make me more sad. It actually makes me less sad, because I love seeing you smile." Maya considered this. "Do you smile now?" "What do you mean?" "I mean really smile. Not the smile you do when you're pretending to be happy. Your real smile." Whoa. Jesus, when had his daughter become so perceptive? "I'm trying to," Ethan admitted. "I've been stuck for a while, but I'm trying to get unstuck." "Is someone helping you?" The question was innocent, but it landed with weight. Ethan thought about Vivian standing in her office, about the coffee shop conversation, about the text messages that felt like lifelines. "Maybe. I think so." "Good. I like it when you're not stuck." After dinner, they watched a movie together, curled up on the couch with Maya's head on his shoulder. Ethan actually paid attention to the plot instead of just staring at the screen while his mind wandered through grief and regret. When Maya started yawning, he carried her to bed. She was getting too big for this, would probably be too big for it next year, and tucked her in. "Daddy?" she said as he was turning off the light. Yeah, sweetheart? I'm glad you sound like you again. Ethan kissed her forehead. Me too, baby. Me too. After Maya was asleep, Ethan sat on the couch with his phone. It was 9:30. He wondered if Vivian's dinner with her parents had happened yet, how it had gone, whether she'd found the courage to be honest. He pulled up her number but hesitated before typing. Was it too soon to text? Too presumptuous? They'd only really known each other for 24 hours, and most of that had been intense emotional spillage that might look very different in the light of day. His phone buzzed in his hand, making him jump. I told them everything, that I'm not okay, that I miss Marcus and Sophie so much some days I can barely breathe, that I've been pretending for 5 years and I can't do it anymore. And you know what happened? Ethan typed quickly. What? My mother started crying, said she'd been so worried about me, that she knew I was pretending but didn't know how to break through my walls. And my father who never shows emotion, grabbed my hand and said he's been waiting 5 years for me to let them back in. Vivian, that's incredible. I threw up in the restaurant bathroom afterwards. Full panic attack. But it was worth it. We talked for 3 hours. Really talked. About Marcus and Sophie, about how much we all still miss them, about how we've been tiptoeing around each other's grief instead of sharing it. I'm so proud of you. I wouldn't have done it without you, without what you said about protecting people versus teaching them to pretend. You were right. Ethan smiled at his phone. How does it feel? Terrifying, liberating, like I just jumped off a cliff and discovered I could fly. Is that too dramatic? Not even a little bit. Thank you, Ethan. I keep saying that, but I mean it. Thank you for seeing me, for not letting me hide. Same to you. I should let you go, it's late. Wait, Ethan typed. Can I ask you something? Of course. Tomorrow night, would you want to have dinner? Nothing fancy, just talking, being honest, not hiding. A long pause. Long enough that Ethan started to regret asking. Then, yes, God, yes, but not at a restaurant, too public, and not at my place. I'm not ready for that yet. My place? Ethan typed, then immediately regretted it. Too fast, too presumptuous. But Vivian's response came quickly. Are you sure? That's a big step, letting me into your private space. I'm sure. Maya will be at her aunt's house tomorrow night. She has a sleepover birthday party, so it would just be us. No pressure, no expectations, just dinner and conversation. What time? 7? I'll bring wine. You don't have to. I want to. See you tomorrow, Ethan. See you tomorrow. Ethan set down his phone and stared at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. In the span of 24 hours, he'd gone from a man who avoided his own apartment to someone inviting his CEO over for dinner. It was insane. It violated every professional boundary. It was possibly the worst idea he'd had in years. And yet, it felt right. Necessary. Like two people drowning had found each other in the deep water and were learning they could keep each other afloat. Sleep came easier that night than it had in months. Ethan dreamed of Sarah, but for the first time the dream wasn't a nightmare. She was sitting in their kitchen, smiling, and when he tried to apologize for moving on, she just shook her head. You're not moving on, Dream Sarah said. You're moving forward. There's a difference. When he woke up at 6:15 the next morning, the words stayed with him. Moving forward. Not forgetting, not replacing, not betraying. Just taking the next step because standing still had stopped being survivable. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Ethan went through the motions at work. Emails, meetings, conference calls, while his mind circled around the evening ahead. At 3 o'clock, he left early, claiming a dentist appointment, and stopped at the grocery store. Stood in the pasta aisle trying to remember what constituted an impressive dinner without looking like he was trying too hard. By 6:30, his apartment was as clean as it had been in 2 years. Ethan had made pasta with a sauce that didn't come from a jar, set the table with plates that matched, even found candles that weren't birthday cake remnants. Then he looked at the candles and realized they were too much, too romantic, too presumptuous, and put them away. This wasn't a date. This was two grieving people having dinner. Nothing more. Except it felt like more. It felt like standing at the edge of something that could either save him or destroy him, and he had no idea which until he took the leap. At 7:04, his buzzer rang. Ethan pressed the intercom button with a hand that was definitely not shaking. "It's me." Vivian's voice crackled through the speaker. "Should I come up?" "Fourth floor, apartment 4C. He opened his front door and waited, listening to footsteps climbing the stairs. Then Vivian appeared at the landing, holding a bottle of wine in one hand and looking nervous in a way he'd never seen. She'd dressed down, jeans again, a soft blue sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Without her CEO armor, she looked younger, more vulnerable, more real. "Hi," she said. "Hi," Ethan echoed. They stood there for a moment, two people on opposite sides of a threshold, both knowing that once she walked through that door, something fundamental would shift. Vivian took a breath, stepped inside, and the door closed behind her with a soft, decisive click. The apartment felt smaller with Vivian in it. Not claustrophobic exactly, but more alive somehow, like her presence had activated spaces that had been dormant for years. She stood in the entryway holding the wine bottle, her eyes taking in the details. Maya's backpack hanging by the door, the row of shoes lined up neatly beneath the coat rack, the photographs covering the walls. "Your home is lovely," Vivian said, but her voice had that careful quality people used when they were trying not to make assumptions. "It's a work in progress," Ethan replied, taking her coat. "I spent the first year after Sarah died not changing anything, kept everything exactly as it was, like a museum. Then I realized I was teaching Maya that we had to live in the past, so I've been trying to make it feel like a home again, instead of a shrine." Vivian's eyes found the largest photograph in the living room, Ethan, Sarah, and baby Maya at the beach, all three of them laughing at something beyond the camera's frame. "She was beautiful. Your wife." "She was. Are you okay with this? Being here, seeing all of this?" "I don't know yet. Ask me in an hour." Vivian held up the wine bottle. "Where's your kitchen?" Ethan led her through the living room into the small kitchen where pasta was staying warm on the stove. He found a corkscrew and 2 glasses while Vivian leaned against the counter, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I'm nervous," she admitted. "Is that strange? I negotiate multi-million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but having dinner with you makes my hands shake. Join the club. I stress cleaned for 2 hours and still wasn't sure if I should use the nice plates or if that would seem like I was trying too hard." "Which did you choose?" "The nice plates. Then I second-guessed myself and almost switched to paper." Vivian laughed, a real laugh that transformed her face. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? 2 supposedly competent adults completely undone by dinner." Ethan poured wine and handed her a glass. "To being honest about how undone we are?" "To being honest," Vivian echoed, and they clinked glasses. The dinner itself was simple: pasta, salad, bread from the bakery down the street. They sat at Ethan's kitchen table with Maya's latest drawings stuck to the refrigerator behind them, and for the first few minutes they ate in comfortable silence. Not the awkward quiet of strangers, but the easier silence of people who'd already seen each other at their worst. "Tell me about Maya," Vivian said finally. "You've mentioned her, but I want to know more. What's she like?" Ethan felt his chest warm. "She's incredible. Smart, funny, way too perceptive for 7 years old. She loves art, drawing, painting, anything that lets her make a mess. She's obsessed with dragons right now. Has this whole elaborate story about a dragon named Sparkle who lives in the clouds and only comes down when kids are sad to cheer them up." "That's beautiful." "It is. But it also breaks my heart because I know she created Sparkle after Sarah died, as this imaginary friend who could make things better when I couldn't." Vivian set down her fork. "You're too hard on yourself. You were grieving too. You were doing the best you could." "My best wasn't good enough. I let her down for a year, Vivian, a whole year where I was physically present but emotionally gone, where she was processing her mother's death alone because I was too wrapped up in my own grief to see hers." "But you see it now. You're present now. That counts for something." "Does it? Or is it too little, too late?" "It's never too late." Vivian's voice was fierce. "Trust me on this. I've spent 5 years wishing I could have one more day with Sophie, one more chance to dance with her, to really listen when she talked instead of checking my phone. You still have Maya. You still have time to show up for her. Don't waste that time punishing yourself for the past. Ethan studied her across the table. Is that advice for me or for you? Maybe both. Vivian took a long sip of wine. Tell me about Sarah. How did you meet? College. She was in my economics class, always sat in the front row and actually did the reading. I was more of a back row guy who showed up hungover and tried to charm my way through exams. She thought I was an idiot. But you won her over? Eventually. Took me 3 months of relentless pursuit. I'd bring her coffee before class, leave notes in her textbook, show up at the library where she studied. She called me a stalker. Were you? Probably a little bit. But she said yes when I finally asked her out, so it worked. Ethan smiled at the memory. Our first date was terrible. I took her to this fancy restaurant I couldn't afford, tried to order wine in French even though I didn't speak French, knocked over my water glass twice. Complete disaster. So how did you get a second date? At the end of the night, standing outside her dorm, I told her the truth. That I'd been an idiot trying to impress her instead of just being myself. That I was nervous because she was the smartest, most beautiful woman I'd ever met, and I was terrified she'd realize I was out of my league. And she kissed me and said she'd rather date the honest idiot than the fake smooth guy. Vivian's smile was sad. She sounds wonderful. She was. Still is, I guess. In my head, in Maya's memories. She's still part of our lives even though she's gone. Ethan met Vivian's eyes. Tell me about Marcus. And Sophie. Vivian's hand tightened around her wine glass. For a moment, Ethan thought she might deflect, might rebuild the walls that had come down, but then she took a breath and started talking. I met Marcus at a company retreat 12 years ago. He worked for one of our competitors, which made things complicated. We spent the whole weekend arguing about market strategy and mergers, really going at each other in these panel discussions. Everyone thought we hated each other. But you didn't? I was fascinated by him. He was brilliant, ruthless in business, but with this unexpected softness underneath. After the retreat ended, he sent me an email that just said, "Dinner? I promise not to talk about quarterly projections." We got married 8 months later. Fast. When you know, you know. Or at least I thought I knew. God, I was so arrogant back then. Thought I had everything figured out, the perfect career, the perfect marriage. And then Sophie came along, and she was perfect too. This tiny, perfect person who looked at me like I hung the moon. Vivian's voice was starting to fracture. Ethan waited, letting her find her way through the words. Sophie was 6 when she died. First grade. She'd just lost her first tooth and was obsessed with the tooth fairy. She'd written this letter asking if the tooth fairy could bring her a baby sister instead of money, and we'd been planning to tell her I was pregnant. Vivian's hands were shaking now. I was 8 weeks along. Found out 2 days before the gas leak. I was going to surprise them when I got back from Singapore. I had this whole plan, Sophie's favorite dinner, a special dessert, then Marcus and I would tell her together. Jesus, Vivian. I lost the baby 3 days after the funeral, stress-induced miscarriage. So I didn't just lose my husband and daughter, I lost my entire future. The family we were building, the life we'd planned, all of it gone in 2 weeks. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. She gripped it hard enough to hurt, anchoring herself. For the first year I was numb, Vivian continued, just going through the motions. Work was the only thing that made sense, so I threw myself into it completely. Acquisitions, restructuring, growth strategies, things I could control. Things that had clear outcomes and measurable results. And the dancing? Started on what would have been Sophie's 7th birthday. I was alone in the office late at night, and I heard this song, one of Sophie's favorites, playing from somewhere in the building. Probably someone's phone or computer, and I just started moving, started humming her lullaby. And for 5 minutes, I felt close to her again. So you kept doing it. Every night I can. It's the only time I let myself remember without the armor on. The only time I'm not the ice queen or the CEO or the woman who survived. I'm just a mother who misses her daughter. They sat in silence, hands clasped across the table. 2 people who'd lost everything learning how to tell the truth about it. The pasta had gone cold, but neither of them moved to clear the dishes. The moment felt too fragile, too important to break. "Can I ask you something?" Vivian said finally. "Something that might be too personal?" "After everything we've already shared, ask. Do you ever feel guilty? For starting to feel better? For having moments where you're happy and you forget to be sad?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "Every single day, it feels like betrayal. Like if I stop grieving for Sarah, I'm admitting she doesn't matter anymore. That her life, our marriage, everything we built together is just over." "Yes, exactly that." Vivian's voice was intense. "People kept telling me Marcus and Sophie would want me to be happy, to move on, to live my life. And I wanted to scream at them because how could they possibly know what Marcus and Sophie would want? They're dead. I don't get to ask them." "But you know what?" Ethan said. "I've thought about this a lot, especially lately. And the truth is, I do know what Sarah would want. She made me promise, right before she died, made me swear I'd take care of Maya, that I'd keep living, that I wouldn't let grief destroy me." "Did you keep that promise?" "Not for a long time. I kept Maya alive and functioned enough to keep my job, but I wasn't living. I was surviving. There's a difference." "And now?" Ethan looked at Vivian, really looked at her. At the mascara she'd carefully reapplied after crying, at the sweater that was soft and approachable instead of armor, at the vulnerability in her eyes that she was trying so hard not to hide. "Now I'm trying to figure out what living looks like, what it means to honor Sarah's memory while still moving forward. To be a father, Maya deserves while also being a man who's allowed to feel something other than grief." "Have you figured it out?" "No, but I think maybe I'm starting to, especially in the last 2 days." Vivian's eyes held his. "Since the office, since we stopped pretending." "Ethan, I need to be honest with you about something, and it's going to sound crazy, but I need to say it anyway." "Okay." "The other night, when you walked into my office, when you saw me dancing and crying and falling apart, that should have been the most humiliating moment of my professional life. Finding out an employee had witnessed me at my absolute lowest should have sent me into crisis mode. I should have wanted to fire you, transfer you, do anything to contain the damage. But you didn't. But I didn't. Because when you looked at me, you didn't see a breakdown. You saw grief. You saw someone who was surviving the only way they knew how. And instead of judging me or pitying me or trying to fix me, you just understood." Vivian's voice was shaking now. "And when you asked to dance with me, when you held me while I cried, I felt seen for the first time in 5 years. Not as the CEO, not as the widow, just as a person who was hurting and needed someone to witness that hurt without trying to make it smaller or more manageable." "I felt the same way," Ethan said quietly. "Like I could finally stop performing. Stop being the strong single dad or the competent employee or whatever role I was supposed to play. I could just be broken and have that be okay. So what does that mean for us? I don't know. But I know that sitting here with you, talking like this, feels more real than anything I've experienced in 2 years. And I think maybe we need this. Need each other. Need someone who understands that grief doesn't follow a timeline or a script." Vivian pulled her hand back and wrapped both arms around herself. "But it's complicated. So complicated. You work for me. People already whisper about me enough without adding inappropriate relationship with employee to the list. So we're careful. We're discreet. At work, we're professional. Outside work, we're two people who are helping each other survive." "Is that all we are? People helping each other survive?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them seemed ready to address. Ethan stood and started clearing the dishes, needing movement to process what she was really asking. "I don't know what we are," he said, carrying plates to the sink. "I know what we're not. We're not ready for anything that looks like dating or romance or whatever people call it. We're both still grieving, still broken, still figuring out how to function." "But?" Vivian had followed him to the kitchen, was standing close enough that he could smell her perfume. "But I also know that when I'm with you, I feel less alone. When I talk to you, I don't have to pretend I'm okay. When you text me at midnight, I'm grateful instead of annoyed. And that means something, even if I can't define what it means yet. Vivian leaned against the counter, watching him rinse dishes. I haven't let anyone close in 5 years. I built these walls that were supposed to protect me, keep me safe, let me function without falling apart. And you walked into my office at midnight and those walls just crumbled. Are you angry about that? I should be. I should be furious that you saw me like that you didn't let me maintain my defenses. But I'm not. I'm grateful and terrified because I don't know how to do this, how to let someone in without losing control completely. Ethan dried his hands and turned to face her. They were close now, close enough that he could see the pulse beating in her throat, could count the unshed tears making her eyes bright. What if we don't have to figure it all out tonight? He suggested. What if we just take it one day at a time, one honest conversation at a time? No pressure, no expectations, just two people who understand each other trying to survive together instead of alone? Can it really be that simple? Probably not. But maybe we start there and see what happens. Vivian studied his face like she was trying to memorize it. You're not what I expected, Ethan Cole. When I pulled up your employee file after that night in the office, I expected to see someone ordinary. Someone I could categorize and dismiss and maybe transfer to a different department so I wouldn't have to face what happened. What did you see instead? Someone who'd survived something terrible and was still showing up, still trying, still being a father even when it hurt. Someone who reminded me that surviving isn't the same as giving up. She reached out and took his hand again, this time with intention instead of desperation. I want to try this. Whatever this is. I want to be honest with someone. I want to stop dancing alone. She stopped, struggling with the words. I want to feel something other than grief, even if it scares me, even if it's complicated. So do I. They stood there in Ethan's kitchen, holding hands like teenagers at a first dance, both terrified of what came next. The apartment was quiet except for the ambient sounds of the building settling, the refrigerator humming, the distant noise of traffic through the windows. I should probably go, Vivian said, but she didn't move. Probably. It's late. You have work tomorrow. We both have work tomorrow. We do. And we agreed to be professional at the office, to maintain boundaries. We did agree to that. So staying longer would be a bad idea. Terrible idea. But still neither of them moved. Vivian's thumb traced small circles on the back of Ethan's hand, a gesture that was either unconscious or deliberate, but either way made his pulse quicken. Can I ask you something else? Vivian said. Something that might be way too personal for whatever stage we're at? You've already seen me cry multiple times. I think we're past the point of too personal. Fair point. She took a breath. When's the last time you were touched? Not just held while crying or shaking hands in a meeting, really touched, in a way that made you feel human. The question hit Ethan like a physical blow. Sarah, 2 years and 3 months ago. The morning before her accident, she kissed me goodbye before leaving for the grocery store. I was distracted, thinking about work. I barely kissed her back. Do you regret that? Every single day. It was our last kiss, and I wasn't even present for it. I've replayed that morning 1,000 times, trying to remember if she said, I love you, or if I did, if I hugged her properly, or just gave her a distracted peck. And I can't remember. The last time I touched my wife, and I can't remember the details. Vivian's eyes were wet. Marcus and I fought the morning before I left for Singapore. Something stupid about dishes in the sink. I was stressed about the trip. He was frustrated that I was always traveling, and we both said things we didn't mean. I left without apologizing, without kissing him goodbye properly, and now that's my last memory, walking away angry over dirty dishes. God, I'm sorry. The thing is, I've convinced myself that I don't deserve to be touched again, that I had my chance at human connection, and I squandered it by being too busy, too focused on work, too invested in being successful instead of being present. So I've spent 5 years in this self-imposed isolation, telling myself it's what I deserve. Vivian, that's not... Let me finish. Her voice was urgent now. But standing here with you, holding your hand, I realize how much I've missed this. Just simple human contact. Someone touching me like I'm a person instead of a CEO or a widow or a cautionary tale. And it terrifies me because I don't know if I'm allowed to want this, if it's betraying Marcus, if it means I'm moving on when I shouldn't be. Ethan understood what she was really asking, what they were both asking without saying it directly. He squeezed her hand. I think Sarah would want me to be happy, to be alive instead of just surviving, to let someone in instead of isolating myself forever. The words felt like confession. And I think maybe touching someone, being touched by someone, letting myself feel something other than grief, maybe that's not betrayal. Maybe that's just being human. And Marcus, what would he want for me? I never met Marcus. But if he loved you the way you describe, I think he'd want you to be happy, to dance with someone instead of alone, to let yourself feel something other than loss. Vivian stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could feel the warmth of her body. This is probably a mistake. Probably? We're both vulnerable, both grieving, both likely to confuse connection with something else. Very likely. And we work together, which makes this even more complicated. Definitely more complicated. So the smart thing would be for me to leave now, to maintain professional distance, to not do what I'm thinking about doing. Ethan's heart was hammering against his ribs. What are you thinking about doing? Instead of answering, Vivian reached up and touched his face, just her fingertips against his cheek, a gesture so gentle it made his breath catch. Her thumb traced his jawline, and Ethan closed his eyes at the sensation. You're the first person to touch me like this in 5 years, Vivian whispered, like I'm something other than untouchable, like I'm allowed to be soft. You are allowed. You're allowed to be anything you need to be. Then can I be honest about what I want right now? Please. I want you to hold me, not because I'm crying or falling apart, just because I'm tired of being alone, tired of going through the world like I'm made of ice instead of flesh. I want to remember what it feels like to be held by someone who sees me. Ethan opened his eyes and found Vivian looking at him with an expression that was equal parts hope and fear. He understood both. Understood that what she was asking for was simultaneously simple and profound. A touch that acknowledged they were both still alive, still capable of human connection, still allowed to want comfort even while grieving. He stepped closer and wrapped his arms around her. Not the desperate embrace of that night in the office, but something gentler, more intentional. Vivian melted against him, her face pressed into his shoulder, her arms tight around his waist. They stood that way for a long time, just breathing together, learning how to be held again. This is okay, right? Vivian asked against his shirt. This doesn't make us terrible people? I don't think so. I think this makes us human people who've been alone too long. I like how you feel, she admitted. Solid, real. Like if I hold on tight enough, I might remember how to be real too instead of just performing reality. You're already real, Vivian. This is the most real I've seen you. She pulled back just enough to look up at him. Her mascara was smudged again, her carefully styled hair mussed, and she looked more beautiful than she ever had in her CEO armor. Can I tell you something that might sound crazy? We're already way past crazy. I think I'm glad you saw me that night, in the office, dancing and crying and falling apart, because if you hadn't, I'd still be doing it alone, still pretending I was fine during the day and breaking in private at night. And I don't want to do that anymore. What do you want? I want this, whatever this is. I want someone who understands, someone I don't have to perform for, someone who's broken enough to know that sometimes surviving means letting yourself fall apart with someone instead of alone. Ethan brushed a strand of hair from her face. Then that's what we'll do. We'll survive together. No performance, no pretending, just honesty. Even when it's messy? Especially when it's messy. Vivian's smile was tremulous but real. I really should go now, before I do something even more inadvisable than what we've already done. What would that be? Stay here. Ask if I could sleep on your couch, because the thought of going back to my empty apartment makes me want to cry. Suggest we forget about professional boundaries and just be two people who need each other. Those all sound reasonable to me. They're not reasonable. They're dangerous. We're moving too fast, feeling too much, confusing grief and connection and need. We should slow down. Be smart about this. You're probably right. But I don't want to be right. I want to stay. The admission hung between them, honest and terrifying. Ethan understood the weight of it, the risk she was taking by asking, the risk they'd both be taking if he said yes. You can stay, he said quietly, not because of anything inappropriate or because we're confused about what this is, but because I understand not wanting to be alone tonight, and because my couch is actually pretty comfortable. Vivian's relief was visible. Are you sure? I'm sure. I'll get you some blankets and a pillow. We can watch something mindless on TV until we're both too tired to think. No pressure, no expectations, just two friends who don't want to be alone. Friends. Is that what we are? I think we're whatever we need to be to survive. Tonight, that means friends who understand each other. Tomorrow, it might mean something else. We don't have to define it. I've spent 5 years defining everything, having clear parameters and boundaries and rules. Maybe you're right. Maybe not defining this is exactly what we need. Ethan released her and moved to the linen closet, pulling out his softest blankets and the good pillows he never used. When he returned to the living room, Vivian was looking at the photographs on the walls again, particularly the one of Sarah. She had kind eyes, Vivian said. You can tell from pictures sometimes whether someone was kind. She is. I don't know what tense to use for dead people. Me neither. I switch back and forth constantly. Sometimes Marcus was my husband. Sometimes he is. Like I can't quite accept the past tense even 5 years later. Ethan set down the blankets and joined her by the photographs. Do you think they'd approve? Of this? Of us trying to survive together? I don't know, but I think they'd understand. And I think they'd want us to be happy, even if happiness looks different than we thought it would. They settled on the couch with a documentary neither of them really watched. Vivian curled up under the blankets, and Ethan sat on the other end, keeping respectful distance, even as every cell in his body wanted to close that gap. They talked through the documentary, sharing stories about their spouses, their children, the lives they'd built and lost. Somewhere around midnight, Vivian's eyelids started drooping. I should really go to sleep. Let you have your space. The couch is yours. I'll be in my room if you need anything. Ethan? Her voice was soft, almost shy. Thank you. For tonight. For letting me stay. For not making this weird. It's definitely weird, but it's good weird. The best kind of weird. He left her settling into the couch and went to his own bedroom, but sleep wouldn't come. He lay in the dark listening to the sounds of someone else in his apartment. The shift of blankets, the soft breathing, the presence that made the space feel less like a tomb and more like a home. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Vivian. Are you awake? Yes. Me too. Too much in my head. Want to talk about it? No, I just wanted to know you were there, that this is real, that tomorrow I won't wake up and discover I imagined all of this. It's real. I'm here. And tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. Together? Together. The phone went quiet, but Ethan felt something settle in his chest, a sense that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to survive alone anymore. That there was someone else in the world who understood the particular weight of grief he carried, who didn't need him to be anything other than honest. He fell asleep thinking about Vivian on his couch, about the way her hand felt in his, about the possibility that moving forward didn't mean forgetting the past. It just meant taking the next step with someone who understood the journey. Morning light filtered through the curtains with a gentleness that felt almost apologetic. Ethan woke to the smell of coffee brewing and the quiet sounds of someone moving in his kitchen. For one disoriented moment, his brain supplied Sarah's name, and the grief that followed was sharp and familiar. Then memory caught up. Vivian had stayed on his couch, and she was apparently awake before him. He found her standing at his kitchen counter in yesterday's clothes, her hair pulled into a messy knot, pouring coffee into 2 mugs she'd somehow found in his cabinets. She looked rumpled and human, and nothing like the ice queen who ran Marrowline Holdings. I hope you don't mind, she said when she saw him. I'm useless before caffeine and your coffee maker was fairly self-explanatory. I don't mind. Ethan accepted the mug she offered. How'd you sleep? Better than I have in months, actually. Your couch is surprisingly comfortable. Or maybe I was just exhausted from all the honesty. She smiled, but there was uncertainty behind it. Are we okay? About last night? I didn't overstep? You didn't overstep. And yes, we're okay. Better than okay. Relief flickered across her face. Good. Because I woke up at 5 in a panic, thinking I'd made a complete fool of myself, asked to stay over like some desperate person who can't handle being alone. You're not desperate. You're human. There's a difference. Is there? Because lately I can't tell. They drank coffee standing in his kitchen, and Ethan was struck by how domestic it felt. How normal. Two people having morning coffee like couples did in movies and commercials, and lives that hadn't been shattered by loss. I need to go home and change before work, Vivian said, checking her phone. If I show up in yesterday's clothes, people will notice. They always notice. Do you want me to drive you? No, I'll call a car. You showing up with me would raise even more questions. She set down her mug. We need to talk about work, about how we handle this there. Complete professionalism, like we discussed. Right. But Ethan, people are going to be watching. They always watch me. Every conversation, every interaction, every time I show favoritism or attention to anyone. If we're not careful, rumors will start. Then we'll be careful. Vivian moved closer, and Ethan could see the war happening behind her eyes. Part of me wants to not care, to say screw the rumors and the politics and just be honest about the fact that we're helping each other survive. But the rational part of me knows that would be catastrophic, for both of us. So we keep it separate. Work is work. Everything else is everything else. Can we really do that? We have to try. She nodded slowly, but doubt lingered in her expression. I should go. Thank you for last night. For dinner, for listening, for letting me stay, for all of it. Thank you for trusting me enough to stay. Vivian hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged him quickly. It was brief and almost professional, except for the way her hands gripped his shoulders like she was steadying herself. Then she pulled back, gathered her things, and was gone before Ethan could find words to delay her leaving. The apartment felt emptier than it had in months. Not the hollow emptiness of grief, but the specific absence of someone who'd been there and left. Ethan cleaned up the breakfast dishes and got ready for work, trying to prepare himself for the complexity of seeing Vivian at the office and pretending they were strangers. The morning at Marrowline passed in careful normalcy. Ethan focused on his work, attended meetings, responded to emails. At 10:30, he saw Vivian in the hallway talking with the CFO, and their eyes met for just a second. She gave him the barest nod, professional, distant, appropriate, and continued her conversation. It shouldn't have hurt. They'd agreed to this. But something in Ethan's chest twisted at the coldness, at having to pretend the woman who'd slept on his couch last night was now just his CEO again. His phone buzzed during lunch. A text from Vivian's personal number. This is harder than I thought it would be. Seeing you and having to pretend we don't know each other the way we do. Ethan texted back, I know, but we knew it would be hard. Did we? Because I don't think I understood how much it would hurt to look at you and not be able to smile, to pretend you're just another employee when you're the person who held me while I cried. We can do this. We just need to find a rhythm. What if there is no rhythm? What if we're trying to do something impossible? Before Ethan could respond, his desk phone rang. It was Derek asking about a logistics issue, and by the time he finished that call and checked his personal phone again, Vivian had sent another message. Sorry, I'm spiraling. Ignore me. I'm fine. But she wasn't fine, and Ethan knew it. He spent the afternoon distracted, half his attention on work and half on his phone, waiting for another text that didn't come. At 5:15, as he was packing up to leave, his work email dinged with a meeting invitation. Sender, Vivian Cross. Subject, Q4 Operations Review. Time, 7 o'clock p.m. Location, Executive Conference Room 4B. Ethan stared at the invitation. There was no Q4 Operations Review scheduled. This was Vivian's way of creating a legitimate reason for them to be in the building at the same time after hours. It was clever and risky, and spoke to how much he was struggling with the separation. He accepted the meeting. The executive floor was empty when Ethan arrived at 7. Conference room 4B was at the far end of the hallway, away from any offices with windows. Inside, Vivian sat at the large table with her laptop open, but the screen was dark. She'd changed into jeans and a sweater again, her armor discarded. Thank you for coming, she said as Ethan closed the door. "I know this is probably breaking our rules, but I needed to see you. Really see you, not just pass you in the hallway and pretend. I'm glad you sent the invitation. I've been checking my phone all afternoon." "Have you?" Something in her expression softened. "I thought maybe I was the only one struggling, that you were handling this better than me." "I'm not handling it at all. I've been useless at work today because all I can think about is you on my couch last night, and whether you're okay, and when I'll get to actually talk to you again." Vivian stood and moved around the table. "This is crazy. We've known each other less than a week, and I'm sneaking around creating fake meetings just to see you. What is happening to me?" "The same thing that's happening to me. We found someone who understands, and now everything else feels hollow by comparison." She stopped in front of him, close enough that he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "I don't know how to do this, Ethan. How to be professional at work and honest everywhere else. How to see you every day and maintain distance. How to go back to being alone after knowing what it feels like to not be alone. So maybe we don't go back. Maybe we find a way forward. But how? We can't keep creating fake meetings. People will notice. And we can't be seen together outside work without raising questions. So what do? Sneak around like teenagers? Only see each other late at night when no one's watching? If that's what it takes. That's not sustainable, Ethan. Eventually someone will see us. Someone will figure it out. And when they do, it's not going to be cute or romantic or some story about two people finding each other. It's going to be a scandal. The CEO having an inappropriate relationship with an employee. Your career will be destroyed. Mine will be damaged. And for what? For not being alone anymore, Ethan said quietly. For having someone who sees us. For surviving together instead of separately. Isn't that worth the risk? Vivian wrapped her arms around herself. I don't know. God, I want it to be. But I've worked so hard to build this career, this reputation. I've sacrificed everything, my personal life, my relationships, my mental health, to be the best CEO I can be. And now I'm risking all of it for something I can't even define. Then maybe we need to define it. How? What are we, Ethan? Really? The question hung in the air between them, demanding honesty neither of them seemed ready to give. Ethan took a breath and tried to find words that felt true. I don't know what we are. I don't know if we're friends or something more or just two broken people clinging to each other. But I know that when I'm with you, I feel less broken. When I talk to you, I don't have to pretend I'm okay. And that matters. That means something. But is it enough? Vivian's voice was almost desperate. Is feeling less broken enough to risk everything we've built? Our careers, our reputations, our carefully maintained lives. I think it might be. Because what's the alternative? Going back to how we were before? Dancing alone in empty offices? Driving in circles at night? Existing instead of living? At least that was safe. Controllable. I knew who I was supposed to be. Did you? Because when I met you in that office, you looked like someone who'd forgotten how to be anything except armor. The words hit harder than Ethan intended. Vivian flinched, then her expression shifted from hurt to something harder. And what did you look like? A man so terrified of his own grief that he hid in his office after hours rather than face his empty apartment. At least I was functional. At least I was building something instead of just surviving. I wasn't judging you. Weren't you? Weren't you thinking that the great Vivian Cross had everything figured out? And then you saw through it and realized she was just another broken person pretending. That's not what I thought. I thought I'd found someone who understood, someone who was fighting the same battle I was. Well, congratulations, you found her. And now what? Now we're both exposed, both vulnerable, both risking everything for something we can't even name. Was that your plan? I didn't have a plan, Vivian. I just saw you and recognized something in myself. That's all this was. That's all it is. Vivian turned away, her shoulders tight. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. I'm sorry. That wasn't fair. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm just scared. Of what? Of this. Of us. Of feeling something for someone again and having it all fall apart. Of letting you in and then losing you the way I lost Marcus. Of being happy for 5 minutes and then paying for it with years of grief. Ethan moved closer but didn't touch her. I'm scared too. I'm terrified that if I let myself care about you, I'm betraying Sarah. That if I move forward, I'm leaving her behind. That if I choose happiness, I'm admitting she's really gone. So we're both terrified. Completely. Then what are we doing here, Ethan? Why are we risking everything for something that might destroy us? Because the alternative is worse. Because being alone was killing both of us slowly. Because maybe, we deserve a chance to be happy, even if we're scared. Vivian turned back to face him, and her eyes were wet. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm strong enough to risk my heart again. You're the strongest person I know. No, I'm not. I'm barely holding it together. This Ice Queen thing, this untouchable CEO persona, it's all performance. Underneath, I'm just terrified all the time. Terrified of feeling too much, of losing control, of letting anyone see how close I am to falling apart. You already let me see that, and I'm still here. For now. But what happens when you realize I'm too damaged, too broken, too much work? What happens when you realize the same thing about me? They stared at each other, two people standing at the edge of something that could either save them or destroy them. Finally, Vivian closed the distance between them and took his hands. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. Can you do that? Yes. I'm falling for you. I know it's too fast, I know it's complicated, I know we're both grieving and vulnerable and probably confusing connection with love. But I wake up thinking about you. I go through my day looking for excuses to text you. I lie in bed at night replaying our conversations. And it terrifies me because I don't know if I'm ready for this, if you're ready for this, if we're both just using each other to avoid dealing with our grief. Ethan's heart was hammering. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me I'm crazy, that we need to slow down, be rational, protect ourselves. I want you to be the voice of reason I can't seem to find. I can't do that. Why not? Because I'm falling for you too. And it terrifies me just as much as it terrifies you. But I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of letting fear keep me from living. Tired of choosing safety over honesty. Vivian's hands tightened on his. This is a terrible idea. The worst. We're going to hurt each other. Probably. People are going to judge us, question our motives, make assumptions. They will. So why does it feel like the only thing that makes sense? Instead of answering, Ethan pulled her close and held her the way he had the night before. Vivian melted against him, and they stood that way in the empty conference room, two people who'd been alone too long learning how to let someone in. What do we do now? Vivian whispered against his shoulder. We figure it out, one day at a time, one honest conversation at a time. And work? The professional boundaries? We maintain them as best we can. We're careful, we're discreet. But Vivian, I can't pretend anymore that you're just my CEO. You're not. You're the person who stayed on my couch last night. The person who trusts me enough to be honest about how broken she is. That matters more than professional boundaries. Vivian pulled back to look at him. What if someone finds out? What if this blows up in our faces? Then we deal with it together. But I'm not willing to give this up just because it's complicated. Are you? She studied his face for a long moment, and Ethan could see her working through the equation: risk versus reward, safety versus honesty, fear versus hope. Finally, she shook her head. No, I'm not willing to give this up, even if it's crazy, even if it's risky. I don't want to go back to being alone. Then we don't go back. They were standing very close now, close enough that Ethan could count the flecks of gold in Vivian's eyes, could see the rapid pulse in her throat, could feel the warmth of her breath. The air between them felt charged with possibility and danger. I should go, Vivian said, but she didn't move. Probably. We're in the office. Someone could walk by. It's after 7. The floor is empty. Still, we agreed to be careful. We did. But neither of them stepped back. They stood frozen in that moment, both aware they were crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Finally, Vivian made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. We're terrible at being careful, aren't we? The worst. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing his jaw the way she had in his kitchen. One more rule? Can we make one more rule? What rule? No matter how complicated this gets, no matter what happens at work or with our careers or with other people, we stay honest with each other. No games, no manipulation, no using this connection for anything except what it is. Just honesty. I can do that. Promise me, Ethan, because if we're going to risk everything, I need to know it's for something real, not just grief masquerading as connection. I promise. Complete honesty. Even when it's hard. Even when it hurts. Vivian's smile was tremulous but genuine. Okay then. We're doing this. Whatever this is. Whatever this is. They left the conference room separately. Vivian first, then Ethan 10 minutes later. The precaution felt simultaneously necessary and ridiculous, like they were characters in a spy movie instead of two adults trying to navigate complicated feelings. But as Ethan drove home, he felt lighter than he had in years. The next few weeks developed a rhythm. At work, they were scrupulously professional. Vivian was the CEO, Ethan was the operations coordinator, and they interacted with the same distant courtesy they'd shown before everything changed. But outside work, they built something else entirely. They texted constantly, during lunch breaks, late at night, early mornings before work. Long conversations about everything and nothing, memories of their spouses, fears about the future, stories about their children. Vivian told him about Sophie's obsession with butterflies, and Ethan sent her photos of Maya's dragon drawings. They shared grief and hope in equal measure, learning how to be honest about both. They met for coffee twice a week, always at different shops, always careful about timing. Vivian wore sunglasses and casual clothes, her CEO armor left behind. Ethan learned her coffee order, learned which topics made her smile and which made her retreat into herself. Learned that she was funny in unexpected ways, that she had opinions about everything from politics to proper pizza toppings, that underneath the Ice Queen was someone sharp and warm and deeply lonely. She came to his apartment 3 more times over those weeks. Never stayed the night again, but they'd have dinner and talk for hours, and each time it got harder for her to leave. Each time the goodbye hug lasted a little longer, meant a little more. But the careful separation between work and personal was starting to fray. Ethan caught himself watching Vivian during company meetings, and twice she'd met his eyes with expressions that were too warm, too knowing. Other people were starting to notice small things. The way Vivian had begun asking operations for reports directly instead of going through middle management. The fact that Ethan's projects were getting more attention than they used to. People are talking, Derek mentioned casually one afternoon. Saying Cross has been paying more attention to our department lately. Think we're getting audited or something? I don't know, Sut, Ethan lied. Maybe she's just being thorough. But he knew it was more than that. Vivian was finding excuses to interact with operations, to be in spaces where she might legitimately see Ethan. It was subtle, but it wouldn't stay subtle forever. The breaking point came 5 weeks after that first night in Vivian's office. Ethan was in a meeting with his team when Vivian walked past the conference room and their eyes met through the glass. She smiled, not the professional CEO smile, but the real one she reserved for him. And something in Ethan's chest expanded so fast it hurt. That's when he realized with absolute clarity he wasn't falling for Vivian Cross anymore. He'd already fallen. Completely. Despite every rational reason not to, despite the complications and risks and impossibility of it all, he'd fallen in love with his CEO. And judging by the way she looked at him through that conference room glass, she'd fallen too. That night his phone rang at 11. Vivian's voice was shaking. We have a problem. What kind of problem? Calvin Rourke called me tonight. He's Marcus's former business partner. We stayed in touch after Marcus died, mainly because Calvin kept insisting I needed someone to look after me. He's been like a self-appointed guardian, always checking in, always making sure I'm okay. What did he want? He's in town for a conference next week, wants to have dinner. And Ethan, he asked about my personal life, whether I was seeing anyone, whether I'd started dating again. Ethan's stomach dropped. What did you tell him? I said no, because what else could I say? That I'm having secret dinners with an employee? That I'm falling in love with someone I work with? He'd lose his mind. He's very protective, very traditional about these things. So we'll be careful when he's in town. It's not that simple, Vivian's voice cracked. Calvin knew Marcus better than anyone. He was at our wedding. He met Sophie hours after she was born. He's one of the last connections I have to that life. And if he found out about us, about you, he'd see it as me betraying Marcus's memory. Are you? Betraying his memory? I don't know anymore. Some days I think Marcus would be happy I'm not alone. Other days I feel like I'm erasing him by letting you in. And Calvin would definitely think I was erasing him. What do you need from me? I need you to understand that when Calvin's in town, I have to be extra careful. I can't risk him seeing us together or finding out about us. He has connections everywhere in the industry. If he decided to make trouble, he could. Are you ashamed of me? Ethan asked, and hated how small his voice sounded. God, no. Ethan, no. But I'm terrified of losing the last link I have to Marcus and Sophie. Calvin knew them. He has stories and memories I don't have. He's like a living archive of the life I lost. If I lose him too, I lose another piece of them. So what are you saying? I'm saying I need space next week. Need to focus on Calvin's visit without the complication of us. Need to remember who I was before you walked into my office and changed everything. The words landed like physical blows. Vivian, please don't make this harder. I'm barely holding it together as it is. Are you ending this? I don't know what I'm doing. I just know I'm drowning in guilt and fear and I need time to think. Take all the time you need, Ethan said, even though every word hurt. I'll be here when you're ready. Will you? Because I'm not sure I deserve that. Not sure I deserve you at all. Let me decide what I deserve. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. I should go. Calvin's expecting me to call him back with dinner plans. Vivian, wait. But she'd already hung up. Ethan sat in his dark apartment with his phone in his hand, feeling the familiar weight of loss settling back over his chest. He'd been here before, this particular flavor of grief that came from caring about someone and watching them pull away. He'd done it himself enough times to recognize the pattern. But this hurt differently than his grief for Sarah. That was the sharp pain of sudden loss, of having something ripped away without warning. This was the slower ache of watching someone you loved choose fear over connection, watching them retreat into safety even when safety meant being alone. His phone buzzed with a text. From Vivian, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I don't know what I'm doing. Ethan typed back, it's okay. Take the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. But as Ethan lay in bed that night, he wondered if that was a promise he could keep. If watching Vivian retreat would eventually break something essential in him. If loving someone who was too afraid to be loved back was just another way of drowning alone. The week that followed was the longest of Ethan's life since Sarah's funeral. He went to work, focused on his projects, and avoided looking at the fourth floor. His phone stayed mostly silent except for brief, careful texts from Vivian that felt more like damage control than connection. Had dinner with Calvin tonight. He's doing well. Asked about the company. Meeting ran late. Hope you're okay. Thinking about you. Sorry I'm distant. Each message felt like a door closing instead of opening. Ethan responded with equal brevity, matching her tone because he didn't know what else to do. He wouldn't push, wouldn't demand more than she could give, but the absence of her, real her, honest her, left a hole that felt familiar in the worst way. Maya noticed the change. On Wednesday night, she set down her fork during dinner and studied him with those too perceptive 7-year-old eyes. You're sad again, she said. Not a question, an observation. I'm okay, sweetheart. You're doing the thing where you smile but your eyes don't smile. You stopped doing that for a while. Now you're doing it again. Ethan set down his own fork. You're right. I am sad. But not the same kind of sad as before. This is different. Different how? How did you explain adult relationship complications to a 7-year-old? How did you say that he'd found someone who made him feel alive again, and now she was pulling away because she was scared and he understood her fear, but it hurt anyway? Sometimes when you care about someone, it's complicated, Ethan said carefully. They might need space to figure things out, and you have to give them that space even when you don't want to. Like when Emily got mad at me and said she needed a break from being friends? Exactly like that. And it hurt, right? But you gave her space and eventually she came back. Did your friend come back? I don't know yet. I'm still waiting. Maya reached across the table and patted his hand. I think they will, because you're a good daddy and a good friend, and nobody stays mad at good people for very long. If only it were that simple. But Ethan smiled at his daughter and felt a rush of love so intense it hurt. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just weren't paying attention before. She wasn't wrong. For 2 years, he'd been so wrapped up in his own grief that he'd missed his daughter growing into this remarkable little person with insights and kindness and a capacity for forgiveness he needed to learn from. That night after Maya was asleep, Ethan sat with his phone and typed out a message he'd been composing in his head all week. Vivian, I know you need space and I'm trying to give you that, but I need you to know something. I'm not going to pressure you or demand anything you can't give, but I'm also not going to pretend that what we have doesn't matter. It matters to me. You matter to me. And when you're ready, if you're ready, I'll be here. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, appeared again. Then nothing. No response came that night. The silence continued through Thursday and Friday. Ethan threw himself into work with an intensity that made Derek ask if he was gunning for a promotion. At home, he was present for Maya in ways he hadn't managed to be in years, helping with homework, playing elaborate dragon games, listening to her rambling stories about school drama. If he couldn't fix his own life, at least he could show up for his daughter. Friday night, his phone finally rang. Vivian's voice was rough, like she'd been crying. Can you come over? To my place? I know it's late and I said I needed space, but I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending I'm fine when I'm not. What's your address? She gave it to him. A high-rise downtown, the kind of building with a doorman and marble lobbies. Ethan changed out of his sweats, arranged for his sister-in-law to stay with Maya, and drove through the city with his heart in his throat. The building was as expensive as he'd imagined. The doorman called up to announce him, and Ethan rode the elevator to the 23rd floor feeling like he was ascending to some final judgment. Would this be where Vivian ended things? Where she told him it was too complicated, too risky, too much? She opened the door before he could knock, and the sight of her made his breath catch. She looked wrecked, hair uncombed, no makeup, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater that might have been Marcus's. Her eyes were red and swollen. Thank you for coming, she said, stepping aside to let him in. The apartment was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture that looked like art, everything clean and expensive and utterly impersonal. It looked like a hotel room, not a home, like a place someone stayed between real life instead of a place where real life happened. Calvin left this afternoon, Vivian said, gesturing for Ethan to sit on the leather couch. We had dinner every night this week. Talked about Marcus, about Sophie, about the old days. He told me stories I'd never heard, showed me pictures I'd never seen. It was like having pieces of them back for a little while. That sounds nice. It was. And it was torture. Because the whole time I was sitting across from Calvin, listening to him talk about how Marcus would want me to honor his memory by staying strong and independent, all I could think about was you. About the fact that I was lying to someone who'd been nothing but good to me. About how Calvin would look at me if he knew about us. Vivian sat on the opposite end of the couch, maintaining distance. And then last night, at our final dinner, Calvin said something that broke me. He said he was proud of how I'd handled Marcus and Sophie's deaths, how I'd stayed focused, stayed successful, stayed true to who I was. He said Marcus would be proud too. Her voice cracked completely. And I wanted to scream at him, because I haven't stayed true to who I was. I've become someone else entirely. Someone who dances alone in her office at midnight. Someone who falls apart and lets a virtual stranger hold her. Someone who's falling in love with an employee she barely knows while pretending she's still the ice queen who has everything under control. Vivian, let me finish. She held up a hand. Because I need to say this before I lose my nerve. After Calvin left tonight, I came home to this apartment and I looked around and I realized something. I've been living in a museum. Everything here is beautiful and expensive and completely empty. There's no life here, no mess, no personality, nothing that says a person actually lives here instead of just sleeping here between work. She gestured at the immaculate space. And then I thought about your apartment, About Maya's drawings on your refrigerator and the mismatched dishes and the couch that's comfortable instead of expensive. About how your home feels lived in, how it's a place where grief and joy coexist, where you're allowed to be messy and human and broken and still building something. Tears were streaming down her face now. I've spent 5 years building this perfect, controlled life. No mess, no vulnerability, no risk. And I thought that was strength. I thought that was honoring Marcus and Sophie. But it's not. It's just a really elaborate way of being alone. Ethan moved closer but didn't touch her. What are you saying? I'm saying Calvin is wrong. Marcus wouldn't be proud of who I've become. He'd be heartbroken. Because the woman he married was passionate and messy and took risks. She laughed too loud and cried during commercials and danced in the kitchen while making dinner. She was alive, Ethan, and I've been dead for 5 years just pretending to function. You're not dead, aren't I? I exist. I succeed. I build companies and make money and check all the boxes. But I'm not alive. Not the way I was when you held me in my office. Not the way I am when we talk for hours and I forget to be the CEO. Not the way I feel when I'm with you. She finally looked directly at him, and the raw honesty in her eyes was devastating. I'm in love with you, Ethan. Completely. Terrifyingly. I know it's too fast and too complicated and probably a mistake. I know people will judge us. I know Calvin would be horrified. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea. But I don't care anymore. Because being with you, being honest with you, being seen by you, that's the first time I've felt alive in 5 years. Ethan felt something break open in his chest. I'm in love with you too. I have been for weeks, maybe since that first night, and it terrifies me because I thought I'd never feel this way again. Thought loving Sarah was the one great love of my life and everything after would just be pale imitation. Is it? A pale imitation? No, it's different, but it's real. You're real. This is real. Vivian closed the remaining distance between them and took his hands. I need to tell you something. Something I've never told anyone. Can I do that? Yes. The night Marcus and Sophie died, I was relieved. Ethan's confusion must have shown on his face because Vivian rushed to explain. Not relieved that they died. God, no. But relieved that I was in Singapore, that I wasn't home, that I didn't have to be the one to find them. And I've carried that guilt for 5 years. That my last thought before I found out they were dead was relief that I was away on business instead of home with my family. Vivian, I've never forgiven myself for that, for being relieved to be away from them, for prioritizing work over family right up until the moment I lost them forever. And I convinced myself that I didn't deserve happiness after that. That being alone was my penance for not being the wife and mother I should have been. She was sobbing now. The kind of deep, wrenching sobs that came from years of buried guilt finally breaking surface. But then you told me about your last morning with Sarah, about being distracted when she kissed you goodbye, about not being present. And I realized we're the same. We're both punishing ourselves for being human, for having normal, flawed last moments instead of perfect movie-worthy goodbyes. Ethan pulled her close and held her while she cried. We can't change our last moments with them. We can't go back and be more present or more appreciative or more anything, but we can choose what we do with the time we have left. What do we do with it? We live, really live, not just survive or function or go through the motions. We be messy and vulnerable and scared. We take risks. We let people in. We dance in kitchens and cry during commercials and feel things even when feeling things hurts. Vivian pulled back to look at him. I want that. I want to live again. But I'm so scared, Ethan. Scared of losing you the way I lost Marcus. Scared of being happy for 5 minutes and paying for it with years of grief. Scared that if I let myself love you, I'll somehow be betraying Marcus and Sophie. I know. I'm scared too. Scared that moving forward means leaving Sarah behind. That if I love you, I'm admitting she's really gone. That happiness means forgetting. So what do we do with the fear? We feel it, and we move forward anyway. Because the alternative is what we've been doing. Existing without living, surviving without thriving, protecting ourselves so thoroughly that we forget how to be human. Vivian nodded slowly, then stood and held out her hand. Come with me. I want to show you something. She led him through the immaculate apartment to a closed door at the end of the hallway. When she opened it, Ethan understood immediately why this apartment felt like a museum. This room was the shrine. Sophie's bedroom had been preserved exactly as it was 5 years ago. Pink walls, stuffed animals arranged on the bed, drawings taped to the walls, books on the shelves. A 6-year-old's room frozen in time, waiting for a child who would never return. I haven't changed anything, Vivian whispered. Haven't moved a single toy or picture or piece of clothing. I convinced myself I was preserving her memory. But really, I was just refusing to accept she's gone. You don't have to change it if you're not ready. But I am ready. That's what I realized tonight. I'm ready to honor Sophie's memory without being trapped by it. Ready to love who she was without pretending she's still coming home. Ready to move forward without forgetting. She turned to face Ethan, and determination had replaced the tears in her eyes. Will you help me? Not tonight, but soon. Help me transform this room into something that honors Sophie without being a shrine. Something that celebrates her life without demanding I stop living mine. Of course, whatever you need. I need you to understand what this means. I'm choosing you, Ethan, choosing us, choosing life over grief. And that's terrifying because it means accepting that Marcus and Sophie are really gone. That I'm allowed to be happy even though they're not here. That moving forward doesn't mean forgetting them. Ethan took both her hands. It doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying them with us while we build something new. It means honoring their memory by actually living instead of just surviving. Promise me something? Anything. Promise me that if we do this, we do it honestly. No hiding, no performing, no pretending. I've spent 5 years being the Ice Queen, and I can't do it anymore. I need to be messy and vulnerable and human. Can you handle that? I can handle anything as long as it's real. Even when I fall apart, even when I have bad days and can't stop crying, even when I'm scared and angry and grieving all over again? Especially then, because I'll have bad days too. Days when I miss Sarah so much I can't breathe. Days when being a good father feels impossible. Days when I wonder if I'm betraying her by loving you, and I need to know you can handle my mess too. I can. I will. We'll handle each other's mess. They stood in Sophie's preserved room, two people making promises about messiness and honesty and moving forward together. Then Vivian took a breath and made one more promise. I'm going to tell the board. Not right away, but soon. I'm going to disclose our relationship properly. Go through HR. Do everything by the book. Vivian, that could affect your position. I know, but I'm not willing to hide you. Not willing to keep this secret like it's something shameful. You're not a scandal, Ethan. You're the person who saved my life by seeing me when I needed to be seen. And if the board has a problem with that, then maybe I'm at the wrong company. Are you sure? No, I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of losing you than I am of losing my job. And that tells me everything I need to know about what matters. They returned to the living room and talked for hours. About logistics and fears and hopes. About how they'd handle work, handle Maya meeting Vivian, handle the inevitable judgment from people who wouldn't understand. About Calvin, and what it would mean to risk that relationship for this one. About memory and grief and the complicated math of loving someone new while still loving someone gone. Somewhere around 2 a.m, Vivian fell asleep with her head on Ethan's shoulder. He sat there holding her, watching the city lights beyond the windows, and thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that first night in her office to this moment, both of them choosing vulnerability over safety, honesty over performance, life over mere survival. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister-in-law. Maya's fine. Sleeping over here tonight. Take your time. Ethan smiled and sent back a thank you. Then he carefully shifted Vivian so she was lying on the couch with her head in his lap. She stirred but didn't wake, and he sat there running his fingers through her hair and feeling grateful in a way he hadn't felt in years. When Vivian woke just after dawn, she found Ethan still there, still holding her, still present. She sat up slowly and looked at him with sleep-soft eyes. You stayed. I promised I would. People don't usually keep promises to me. I'm not people, and you're not the Ice Queen anymore, remember? You're just Vivian, and Vivian deserves people who keep their promises. She kissed him then, soft and tentative, a question more than a statement. Ethan kissed her back, and it felt like the most honest thing he'd done in years. Not desperate or hungry, but gentle and real. A kiss that said, "We're here, we're alive, we're choosing this." When they pulled apart, Vivian was smiling through tears. "I want to meet Maya, properly, not as your boss or some distant figure, as the person who's important to her father. She'll have questions." "Good. I want her to ask questions. I want to be honest with her the way we're honest with each other." "When?" "Soon. This week. We'll figure out the right time and the right way, but soon, because I'm done hiding what matters." They made breakfast together in Vivian's pristine kitchen, and Ethan taught her how to make pancakes the way Maya liked them. She burned the first batch and laughed about it instead of trying to be perfect. They ate at her dining table and talked about the day ahead, about work and complications and next steps. At 8:30, Ethan's phone rang. Maya calling from his sister-in-law's house. "Hi, Daddy. Are you coming to get me?" "Soon, sweetheart. I'll be there in an hour. Did you have fun?" "So much fun. Aunt Jennifer let me stay up late and we watched movies and made popcorn. Are you feeling better?" "I am. Much better. Is your friend back?" Ethan looked at Vivian, who was watching him with soft eyes. "Yeah, baby. My friend is back." "Good. I'm glad you're not sad anymore." After he hung up, Vivian asked the question he'd been waiting for. "When do I get to meet her?" "This weekend, if you're ready. We could do something casual, park maybe. Let Maya see us together, ask her questions, take it slow." "I'd like that. But Ethan, I need to tell you something first. I don't know how to be a mother anymore. It's been 5 years since Sophie died, and I'm terrified of meeting Maya. Terrified I'll say the wrong thing or she'll remind me too much of Sophie, or I'll break down in front of her. She's tougher than she looks, and she understands grief better than most adults. She'll be okay with your mess. Just like her father. Just like her father." That weekend they met at a park near Ethan's apartment. He'd explained to Maya that a friend was joining them, someone important to him, and Maya had accepted this with the matter-of-fact wisdom of children who'd learned early that life was complicated. Vivian arrived in jeans and a sweater, her hair loose, no armor at all. When Maya ran up to them from the swings, Vivian knelt down to her level. "Hi, Maya. I'm Vivian. Your dad has told me so much about you." "Are you Daddy's girlfriend?" Maya asked with characteristic directness. Vivian glanced at Ethan, who nodded slightly. "I am. Is that okay with you?" Maya studied her seriously. "Do you make him happy?" "I try to. Does he seem happy to you?" "Happier than he's been. He smiles with his eyes again." Maya looked between them. "Okay. You can be his girlfriend, but you have to promise something." "What's that?" "Promise you won't leave. Daddy's been sad enough. He doesn't need more sad." Vivian's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled through them. "I promise I'll try my very best not to make him sad. And if I ever do make him sad, you have permission to tell me I'm being a bad girlfriend." "Deal." Maya held out her hand to shake, and Vivian took it solemnly. They spent the afternoon at the park, and Ethan watched two people he loved learn each other. Vivian pushed Maya on the swings and asked about her dragon stories. Maya showed Vivian her drawings and explained the complex mythology she'd created. When Maya asked why Vivian looked sad sometimes, Vivian told her the truth, that she'd lost her daughter a long time ago and sometimes missing her hurt. "Like how Daddy misses Mommy?" Maya asked. "Exactly like that." "That's okay. You're allowed to be sad about that. Daddy and I are sad about Mommy too sometimes, but we're also happy about other things. You can be both. You're very wise, Maya. That's what Daddy says." The following week, Vivian called an emergency board meeting. Ethan didn't know exactly what she said, but she told him afterward that she'd disclosed their relationship, offered to recuse herself from any decisions involving his department, and made it clear this was non-negotiable. 3 board members objected. 2 threatened to call for her removal as CEO. Vivian's response was simple. "Then do it. But understand that if you force me to choose between this relationship and this job, I'm choosing the relationship. Every time." The board backed down. They issued guidelines about disclosure and appropriate conduct, assigned an independent reviewer to monitor any interactions between Vivian's office and Ethan's department, and ultimately decided that the Ice Queen, who'd tripled their company's value, had earned the right to have a personal life. Calvin Rourke was less understanding. When Vivian told him about Ethan, he called her disrespectful to Marcus's memory, said she was making a mistake, questioned Ethan's motives and whether this was appropriate given their professional relationship. Vivian listened to all of it, then said something that Ethan would treasure forever. "Calvin, I loved Marcus with everything I had, and when he died, part of me died too. But the part that survived deserves to live, really live. And Ethan makes me want to live again. I'm not erasing Marcus. I'm not forgetting him. I'm just refusing to spend the rest of my life alone because I'm afraid of betraying a memory." Calvin hung up on her, didn't speak to her for 3 weeks, but eventually he called back, and though things weren't the same between them, he grudgingly accepted that Vivian was allowed to move forward with her life. 2 months later, on what would have been Sophie's 11th birthday, Vivian asked Ethan and Maya to help her transform Sophie's room. They spent the day carefully packing away toys and clothes, taking down drawings, sorting through memories. Maya asked questions about Sophie, and Vivian answered them honestly, sharing stories, showing pictures, crying and laughing in equal measure. By evening, the room was different. Still Sophie's, but not frozen. Vivian had created a memory wall with photographs and drawings, but the rest of the space had been opened up. They painted one wall a soft lavender, added a comfortable chair by the window, made it a place Vivian could go to remember Sophie without being trapped by grief. "What will you use this room for now?" Maya asked. "I'm not sure yet. Maybe a reading room, maybe a place to work on art projects. What do you think Sophie would want?" Maya considered this seriously. "I think she'd want you to make something happy here, something that makes you smile instead of just sad." "That's exactly what I think too." That night, after Maya was asleep on Vivian's couch, Ethan found Vivian standing in Sophie's transformed room. She was holding a photograph of her daughter, 6 years old, grinning at the camera, full of life. "Thank you," she said when she heard him come in, "for helping with this. For understanding that I needed to do it, but couldn't do it alone. You're not alone anymore. Neither of us is. I kept thinking about what you said, about carrying them with us while building something new, and I realized that's what we're doing, not replacing Marcus and Sarah, not forgetting Sophie, just making space for new joy alongside old grief. That's all any of us can do." Vivian set down the photograph and turned to face him. "I want to tell you something I realized while we were working in here today." "What's that?" "Sarah made you promise to keep living, to take care of Maya, to not let grief destroy you. And you kept that promise by letting me in, by choosing connection over isolation, by being brave enough to move forward." Her voice was thick with emotion. "And I think Marcus would want the same for me, would want me to find happiness again, to dance with someone instead of alone, to build a life instead of maintaining a museum. So this, us, isn't betraying them. It's honoring what they wanted for us. To keep living. To keep living." 6 months after that first night in Vivian's office, they had dinner at Ethan's apartment with Maya. They made pancakes together, all 3 of them, and the kitchen was full of laughter and flour and the kind of mess that comes from actually living. Maya showed Vivian her latest dragon drawing, and Vivian shared a story about Sophie that made them all laugh. After Maya went to bed, Ethan and Vivian stood in the kitchen doing dishes together. It was domestic and simple and absolutely ordinary. And it was everything. "I never thought I'd have this again," Vivian said softly. "This feeling, like I'm part of something instead of just watching life happen from behind glass. Neither did I. I thought Sarah was my one chance at happiness, and when she died, that was it, game over. But it wasn't game over. No, it was just the end of one story and the beginning of another. A different story, but still a good one." Vivian set down the dish she was washing and turned to face him. "I love you, Ethan Cole. I love your daughter. I love the life we're building. And I'm not scared anymore, or I'm still scared, but I'm doing it anyway. I love you too. And I'm grateful every day that you decided to dance in your office at midnight, that I was there to see you, that we were both brave enough to be honest about how broken we were. We're still broken. Maybe, but we're broken together, and somehow that makes us whole. They finished the dishes and moved to the couch, where Vivian curled up against Ethan's side in the easy comfort of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. They talked about work and Maya's upcoming birthday and plans for the weekend. Normal things, beautiful things, the ordinary magic of building a life. Outside, the city moved through its night rhythms. Inside, two people who'd survived loss were learning how to live again. Not by forgetting what they'd lost, but by making space for what they'd found. Not by replacing old love, but by allowing new love to exist alongside it. They fell asleep on the couch that night, holding each other the way they had that first night in Vivian's office. But this time it wasn't desperation that held them together. It was choice. It was hope. It was the conscious decision to keep living, keep loving, keep moving forward even when it was scary. Because that's what surviving meant, not just enduring the grief but eventually learning to dance again. Not alone in dark offices, but together in kitchens and living rooms and all the ordinary spaces where life actually happened. And somewhere, in whatever place the dead go to watch the living, Sarah and Marcus and Sophie were smiling. Because the people they'd loved had kept their promises, had kept living, had found each other in the grief and built something beautiful from the wreckage. The end wasn't really an ending at all. It was just the next chapter in two lives that had been broken and were slowly, carefully healing together.